Wednesday, March 2nd at 7:30 p.m. in the board meeting room. Thank you for all those people in person. We've got a full house in person. We've got some folks in the lobby, and I'm sure I'll see who's online shortly. 77 folks online, so great. So thank you again for joining us this evening in person and on Zoom. The board appreciates all the participation and thoughts around the 2022-2023 school budget programs. We also appreciate working with the RTM F&B, RTM Education, and the Board of Finance. These are our colleagues along with the public. It is a long process, and we will take some lessons learned and feedback from the budget cycle to see what, if any, changes can be discussed as we go forward with this transparent process, and always look to see how we can be more efficient. On masks, yes, the governor has signaled he is endorsing a plan developed in consultation with the Connecticut Department of Public Health and the Connecticut State Department of Education to eliminate the statewide requirement that is in effect as part of Connecticut's COVID-19 safety protocols for masks to be worn in all schools, effective Monday, February 28th. And on this date, allow the determination on whether to require masks in these locations to be made at the local level. The plan is contingent upon the Connecticut General Assembly voting to extend through legislation the governor's existing executive order that enables the public health commissioner with the ability of implementing mask requirements in certain settings. We believe this is all moving in a very positive direction for local decision-making, as our 2 letters to the governor outlined. Dr. Adley and the board and our local health team will work together to understand how this will work and the possible metrics or guidance that will possibly be used to manage this at the local level. Dr. Adley will provide some additional updates during his remarks. Again, we appreciate the community feedback on the current mask mandate and the discussion around it. Good news at the selectmen meeting this week. The building committee members were voted on, and the building committee for the Royal, Hinley, and Holmes renovation project can continue to move forward. Thank you to all those volunteering for this exciting project. I thought I would mention, if you had not heard, this includes removing the portables, which have helped us considerably with space and cost during COVID. Open choice. Thank you to the administration and board for the work done around this program. And thank you again to the public for your participation in the conversation around this program. The program was presented, discussed, and debated through the board process, and a public hearing was also added. The program was voted on outside of the budget that it was proposed in, and the program will not move forward this year. The board bylaw 9340 provides that town residents or taxpayers may make a written request of the Board of Ed chairperson to add an item on the agenda for a regular meeting. The bylaw does not permit a taxpayer or resident to insist that an item be added to the agenda. The chairperson and the board have received requests through email to add a discussion and a vote on open choice to the agenda this evening. I have not received a request from any board member to revisit the issue, and it would not make sense to add the matter to the board agenda unless a board member wishes to change his or her mind. If a board member would like to place the matter on the agenda for this meeting, it would require a 2/3 vote to amend the agenda. I would ask now if any board member is requesting a vote that this item be placed on the agenda for this meeting so that the board members can discuss and vote on the matter again. Thank you. With that said, thank you again for participating in the conversation around open choice, and the board will move forward with the agenda as posted. Again, thank you for all the hard work and the conversation around this budget and programs like open choice. It is appreciated. We are one community with a high-performing district that continues to be recognized for excellence. As I've said in the past, while the last 2 years have been a challenge, the district continued to move forward, and we lead, keeping the focus on our students and keeping them in school in a safe environment. Thank you to all our administrators and teachers for all that they do for our students every day while traveling to Darien and taking care of their families also during these unprecedented times. While we have no meetings scheduled with winter break coming up, the board will be flexible if a special meeting needs to be called with respect to the mask mandate and proposed changes. If we do not meet again, the board wishes everyone a safe and healthy winter break. So Michelle, we will move on to public comment.
Good evening. For participants in person, please wait for the chairperson to acknowledge and call each participant to the microphone. For participants via Zoom, please click the raised hand option. The facilitator will acknowledge and unmute each participant. For all participants, please state your name and address for the record log. Each participant will have up to 3 minutes to comment.
Michelle, we'll start with folks in the building. So anyone in the audience, please step up to the podium. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lori Olson and I live at 16 Littlebrook Road North. I am co-chair of CDSP. Tonight marks the end of the Board of Education's budget process. Parents have watched meetings, read materials, asked questions, and have been more engaged in this process than any other year. Despite this deep engagement, we still do not have answers to the following questions. Why these drastic cuts? Why were they never discussed before ad cut night? Why have they still not been examined? This budget season, we have seen a lack of transparency and a breakdown of trust. A lack of transparency can cause dissension, not only with the public, but with the school staff and administrators. Establishing and maintaining trust requires effort, communication, and intention. It is imperative for board members to remember that as individuals, you are elected to serve and represent the needs of our children and our school district. It is not about your individual desires or goals. Interestingly, one area where we have heard from all board members is diversity, equity, inclusion. We were surprised that DEI work is on the cut list because across the board, our community has said DEI is important. In fact, all but one of you has said that you believe in DEI. You made clear that you voted against the transfer of Ken Shelton because you did not feel he was appropriate consultant for Darien, or you did not feel that open choice was appropriate at this time. But the line items for DEI consultant work in accounts 12001 and 25033 in RC 19 are not for Ken Sheldon or open choice. They're to make sure the work continues, however the district feels most appropriate. To cut any DEI work after all but one of you have made it very transparent that it is not the work itself that you object to would further erode trust. Budget season is a process where board members exercise their mandate to make sure students receive what is necessary to educate them while being fiscally responsible. This year, the process is breaking down due to lack of transparency. People have been disagreeing with each other for a long time. This time it feels different. We are weaponizing teachers and staff, parents and students. We need to bring people together instead of deciding things in the dark.
Thank you for your comments this evening. Who's next from the audience?
Good evening. Barry Palmer, 17 Putnam Lane, Danbury. I'm the president of the Teachers Association. I want to speak to you tonight regarding the impact on students and staff of the proposed cuts that still remain on the table for the board to consider. I want to make sure we are all aware that the elimination of 8 administrative positions could in fact lead to 8 teachers losing their jobs due to district contractual obligations to provide those administrators with positions. We would all love to hear a discussion as to what the rationale is behind the proposal to defund the school district is. Is there a good reason to dismantle the #1 high school in the state? If there is, we should hear it and we should have the discussion. But if the continued silence is indicative of some other motivation or some hidden agenda that the public doesn't know about, we need to consider the message we are sending to our staff. While neighboring districts are rewarding teachers with bonuses, apparently we have decided instead to show teachers the door. The path we're on is not sustainable. If we continue to endure the erosion of talent that we have witnessed over the last couple of years, coupled with our difficulty in recruiting new teachers to come to work here, our school district will no longer be a premier district. Just this school year alone, we have had hundreds of students impacted by their teachers leaving in the middle of the year. And while it's convenient to blame the national teacher shortage on our staffing challenges, the fact of the matter is this: many teachers who leave us are leaving to teach somewhere else. As a district that prides itself on only hiring the best, we need to remind ourselves that the best have options. We need to show how much we appreciate our teachers by taking actions that will return Darien to a desirable district that both retains and attracts the best teachers. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments this evening. Who's next from the audience? They're lined up outside. Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi, Susie Flaherty, 6 Lake Drive. I just first of all wanted to say thank you to the board because I'm rather new at this and I've been asking a lot of questions and I have been expressing a lot of concerns and asking you why you're voting, how you're voting. And I appreciate that most of you have gotten right back to me. And I can't tell you how much that helps build back some of the trust that was discussed earlier. Mr. Rossini, thank you. Mrs. Best, thank you. Mrs. Ockman, thank you. Mrs. McCammon, thank you. Mrs. Parent, thank you. Mrs. Worm, thank you so much for getting back to me. I've been up here a lot talking about DEI, and I'm not going to repeat all the things I've said in the past, but I was thinking today that the most important thing to me is that our community is asking for this. Our community is telling us that we need it fully funded as presented by Dr. Adley in the budget. Whether it's the child who's drawing the swastika on the bus seat or the parent who is telling their child not to hang out with the bisexual friend anymore because it'll ruin her reputation. Whether it is using racial slurs on the playing field or in the hallway or an adult assuming that brown and black children who come here will be ELL learners. These are all reasons why we are asking and needing DEI in our community, in our schools. So I am encouraging you to please, please leave DEI as it is budgeted with no cuts so that we can have a quality education that all of us as parents and adults in this community value for ourselves and our students. Thank you.
Thanks for speaking this evening. Who's up next inside the room? If 2 or 3 people want to line up down the hallway there as to who's next in the room, that would be fine.
Amy Zurby, 9 Morehouse Drive. This past weekend, I attended an uplifting event. I went to the FCAC Cheerleading Championship. Even though there were 12 teams competing, there was camaraderie among all of the cheerleaders. While one team performed, the other teams cheered them on from the sidelines, applauding after each successful tumbling run and stunting routine. After all the teams finished competing, the cheerleaders danced in large circles, mixing with other teams while they waited for the final scores. This camaraderie is in sharp contrast to what is happening within our schools. By now, you know about the persistent racism, anti-Semitism, and homophobia. These kids need our help. Almost every one of you have shared concerns over the declining mental health of our students. I have heard you comment on how sad it is to see the students wearing masks. DEI will benefit the mental health of the entire community. Please do not exclude the people of color, Jewish people, and LGBTQ students from receiving mental health help in our schools. 6 of you previously approved a transfer of funds to continue our engagement with a DEI consultant, and I thank you for that. I hope that members of this board will stand up to the bullies, stand up for our kids, and allow the district to continue its work on DEI. Please do not cut funds related to DEI consulting services or funds related to any DEI professional development. I hope in the future that we will follow Fairfield Public Schools' lead and hire a director of DEI. Thank you.
Thanks for speaking this evening. Who's next? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Paul Rivera. I live at 12 Wills Road in Newtown, Connecticut. I'm here tonight as representative of the Darien Administrators Association. Ordinarily, there would be more members of my bargaining unit here tonight, but for health and safety reasons, we've restricted our in-person representation and instead are mostly participating online. I confidently speak on behalf of my colleagues in the DAA that we have always appreciated the collaborative efforts we have experienced in working with our Central Services administrative team, in addition to the members of the Board of Education, in creating a learning environment for our students that has helped them achieve their individual goals and reach their dreams. We are proud of all of our students' achievements and of the high quality education that is delivered in our community. We have always appreciated the thoughtful process that our Central Services Administration undertakes in creating a budget to help support this high-quality education, in addition to the thoughtful, well-informed decisions that board members have made in improving past budgets. My colleagues and I curiously and anxiously listened to tonight's proceedings, especially the proposed 20% reduction impacting the members of my bargaining unit. I would like to conclude by thanking our parents for their support in our daily efforts and for entrusting us with your children. For our building staff who demonstrate faith in our leadership, especially through these past 2 years that have required incredible efforts by all of our staff members to keep our students in school. And for our students who bring us so much joy and challenge us every day to continue to improve in our craft. I thank all of you for your time this evening and for your dedication to our learning community. Thank you.
Thanks for speaking this evening.
Okay, if I take this off.
Sure, go ahead. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Kristen Karns. I live at 40 Fitch Avenue. Thank you all for coming. This has been probably a pretty brutal budget season for all of you, and it's been kind of upsetting clearly for a lot of us. I just want to, as you consider your role tonight, I just want to, I was interviewed earlier today and I made the point that, we vote with our pocketbooks, and, where we spend our money is what we value. And as an independent as a representative board, you have been elected to manage our educational district and make fiscal decisions with our budget. We are. And while I had, quite frankly, little hope that our rally the other day was going to trigger all the necessary steps in order to get a revote, I do think it was all within our purview to come together and, raise the issue. And I appreciate those that turned out. I appreciate that it was a cold day. There's no harm, no foul for not coming, but there were a lot of people there. And as you look at these budget cuts on the table, the fact that they zero in so precisely on the DEI initiatives that your constituents have raised so much concern over, both for the younger ages and the high school kids currently, your decisions that you're making tonight are going to show what you value. And a lot of you have said that you value DEI and you value, programs that are going to work, just not this time. Well, here's another way for you to do it. You can brush off certain programs and say that they may not work, but overall, you're here to choose. Please do not cut those programs that don't even have any sort of definition, because that's not your job either. That is our administration's job to decide what we need. And this is what he's saying. And it may have been hard to approve the funding for Ken Shelton's additional work, and I applaud you for doing that, but to cut that off right now would send a huge, huge message on what actually matters. And there have been programs in this town that have been invested in over the years, decades even, that have grown to be the programs that this town waves a flag about and celebrates. And I'm going to say it, sports, football, all those things, those programs were not even considered, at least from my reading of the budget cuts. No chance is there. And I'm not saying that's the answer, but when you talk equity, you look across the board. But these zeroing in on our, salary cuts and curriculum, teacher jobs and things like that, it just doesn't. It makes me question what values are actually being conveyed with these budgets. So thank you very much. Vote with your heart. We're all backing you, and thanks for your time.
Thanks for speaking this evening.
Katie Lublin, 24 Maplewood Drive, CDSP Special Education Chair. Prior to the establishment of the 6 through 12 department chairs, parental complaints about 6th grade math and 9th grade reading comprehension and writing skills were frequent and impassioned. Since their implementation, those complaints have been reduced drastically. Department chairs have eased the transition from elementary to middle and middle to high school with great and noticeable impact. Administration has called these positions critical and warned that their elimination would be a major setback for Darien Public Schools. What then is the benefit of this proposed budget cut? How is it beneficial to go backwards to a time and process where teachers carrying a full course load with no release time are tasked to coordinate curriculum without authority to evaluate implementation or calibration. Removing this authority places the responsibility for teacher evaluations back with building administration. How many teacher reviews would have been conducted over the last 18 months when administration was focused on opening schools and keeping kids in classrooms? How much more difficult would it be for administrators to ensure consistency of curriculum, workloads, assessments, and weighting of grades across course level, while also shouldering all of their current responsibilities? Having department chairs who are subject experts, responsible for curriculum content, as well as teacher supervision and evaluation, is what fosters growth in teaching, in learning, and in student outcomes. Having these roles responsible for 6 through 12 creates continuity, which improves student transition and experience for all learners. On a personal note, I had the pleasure of attending last week's curriculum night held at the high school for parents of rising freshmen. I was in awe of the stellar professionalism displayed by the department chairs. Without exception, they spoke with deep subject matter and course knowledge. Without exception, each one spoke with enthusiasm and pride of DHS's staff and students. Not one belied the risk their jobs faced then and still face now. They showed up for the students and gave nothing less than their best. I hope this board will do the same.
Thank you for speaking this evening.
Good evening, Carolina Magowie, 28 Kensett. I want to thank Dr. Adley, the teachers, and the rest of the administration for the work they have done so far. Besides navigating the pandemic in such an excellent way and making sure our children went back in person as soon as possible and in as normal setting as possible while following health and state directives, I know we have not been an easy town to work with, and I appreciate tremendously the patience and grace you have all shown us. I come to you today to request that even though open choice was voted out of the budget by the 5 members of the board in the last meeting, we do continue to evaluate this program in future budgets and as one of the very reasonable answers to improving the education of our children in the Darien public school system. We have a responsibility to give our children the best education we can with the funds our town provides. And one of the areas that we keep failing is in the DEI effort. Several of our students came and told you horrific stories about what they have gone through in DHS. We heard from many board members that it is a time to focus solely on our children and remediate what COVID might have done to them mentally and emotionally. Hopefully tonight, all the funds requested by Dr. Adley to continue this important work will be supported by the majority of the board. And we do indeed show that the board is putting our children first and ahead of any agendas. I would also like to ask that in future budget meetings, when you go through your ad-cut list, the member of the board requesting the item in question give an explanation as to their thought process. I understand there is a whole evening separate for that one to have further discussions, but giving an explanation as to where they're coming from might be extremely helpful to understand the request. I'm afraid that several of those cuts proposed 2 meetings ago by Mr. Brown will be removed without any further discussion, and that there will be many questions unanswered. I hope to hear from him as well as from Mr. Sini and Mr. Maroney regarding to their proposed cuts and rationale. Once again, thank you for your time.
Thanks for speaking this evening.
My name is Stacey Ta. I live at Clocks Lane. I'm disappointed the board did not motion to amend the agenda to reconsider the vote on open choice. Dr. King said, "The time is always right to do what is right." Mr. Maroney, Ms. McCammon, you appeared to struggle with your vote last week on open choice. As an empath, my heart ached as you struggled to tell, which tells me you know open choice is the right thing to do. But you are being pressured to vote against what you know is best to do for our children in our community. Mr. Maroney, there were immediate consequences to last week's vote. Numerous articles locally throughout the state and even across the country were written about Darien refusing to allow a handful of students into our schools. And if that vote stands, more consequences will likely follow. Funding and grants will be affected. Note that Norwalk received significant funding for their high school because legislation provides grants to towns that commit to diversifying and welcoming students from outside the city walls. Mr. Maroney, you ran on local decisions. The decision is in your hands, and I'm asking you to be brave tonight and to show us what you stand for. Ms. McCammon, I have heard you verbally support inclusion for years. You were passionate about diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout the many months of the work we did on the strategic plan. You have stood where I stand right now, asking this board to make Darien more inclusive. 7 years ago, you called me. You asked me to join you as a parent volunteer to help you make Darien more inclusive. So I stand here today asking you to remember the critical importance of that goal and to help me make Darien more inclusive. You were given another chance to do what was right for our children and our community tonight. You threw it away. You cannot hide tonight. Even though none of you motioned to amend the agenda, there will be a headline tomorrow. What do you think the papers will say? History is watching us. Our children are watching. Our teachers and staff are watching. Our town is watching. Present and future potential businesses are watching. The state is watching. The entire country is watching what we, Darien, do next. Please make the right decision, not only because everyone is watching you, but because it's the right thing to do. Please reconsider and vote for open choice. Please protect our district's much needed diversity initiatives and do not vote for any proposed DEI related cuts, and protect our staff positions.
Thanks for speaking this evening.
Good evening. I'm Courtney Kelly. I live on Abbey Road, and I'm the chair of the Literacy and English Education Department in the School of Education at Manhattanville College. And I'm also the mother of a 6th grader, a proud graduate of Holmes Elementary, who's currently enjoying his first year at Middlesex. I came here tonight after a long workday when I could be home watching The Simpsons and reading with my son, because I'm concerned about the efforts of a vocal minority here in Darien to limit our children's access to diverse perspectives. As a former middle school and high school ELA teacher and a current teacher educator, I've had the opportunity to interact meaningfully with people from backgrounds different from my own, both in the US and abroad. I've worked hard to develop the communication skills and cultural awareness needed to succeed in these settings, a process that was complicated by the fact that I was already an adult when I started to use these tools regularly. Let's do better for our children. Denying the youth of Darien access to a robust DEI program not only potentially limits their understanding of the world in which they live and the diverse people who share it, it also underestimates their willingness and capacity to engage with ideas that challenge their own thinking. These ideas will not dilute the rigor of our schools, but rather add to it. My time as both a teacher and a mother has taught me that children are stronger and smarter than we might think. We should trust ours with a rigorous curriculum that increases their sensitivity to other cultures and raises their awareness of the pressing social issues they will face as citizens in local, national, and global communities, even while it prepares them for success as they move on to college and careers. Thank you.
Thanks for speaking this evening.
Good evening. I'm Clara Sartori. I live at 161 Old Kings Highway South. I am a member of the RTM Education Committee and a former Board of Ed member. My comments tonight are my own. I would like to make a few points regarding the open choice program, should the board revisit it in the future. Did you all know that when the new Darien High School was under construction, Norwalk allowed Darien football and lacrosse teams to use Bryan McMahon's field as the home field for Darien? For nearly 2 years, on alternating weekends, Darien student athletes, coaches, parents, and spectators took over the Bryan McMahon campus and used it as their own. A sea of blue and white greeted Darien players during each game, thanks to the Darien parents who transformed Bryan McMahon fields to look like they belonged to Darien. We invaded residential neighborhoods, held tailgates, and even a few games under Friday night lights. While I know that a football field is not the same as a classroom, would it be too much to ask you that you consider this when rethinking open choice? Second, considering the very legitimate concerns about the uncertainty of kindergarten enrollment and the new housing being built, please consider initiating open choice for Darien with fewer students, possibly 8 students for 2 schools the first year, and then expand it after that. Finally, please assign someone to represent Darien on the CES Rep Council. This is the entity that will oversee open choice in this area. Darien should have a seat and a vote as important decisions are made, such as the hiring of high-level administrators, analysis of policy revisions, and communication of special ed and professional development programs that may be of interest to Darien teachers, students, and parents. Monthly reports given during board committee updates will allow the community to become familiar with CES on an ongoing basis and will not fear them when they hear about programs offered by them, such as open choice. Thank you very much.
Thanks for speaking, Clara.
Good evening. I'm Arpita Muchal, residing at 369 Middlesex Road. And I want to thank the board for being here, for doing the work that you do all year round. But today's the time to think and reflect on why you are here and why you do what you do here. Some of you on both sides of the aisles have heard from me and supported me over the years while I have raised my 2 girls here in Darien, Connecticut. When we moved to Connecticut, it was a question, where do we go to raise our girls? At that point, it was 1 kid. And we chose Darien despite a lot of apprehension from members of my own community and other people of color. I have to say it's been a mixed blessing. There are days when I wonder if we made the right choice. And then I see a lot of friendly faces and support around town that make me feel that we did the right thing. I'm asking here and requesting each and every board member who is serving here in a volunteer manner to consider and vote to fully fund the DEI initiative. This needs to be funded for this school year, 2022-2023. Think once again, why are you here? Think of your children and the education that you hope to offer them. If DEI is not funded by you, you will rob them of 1 more year of desperately needing the support that they need. My kids are learning how not to other others because they have been othered in the school system. Will your kids be okay learning that it's okay to other others? Is this the community that they want to leave from and represent once they are in the larger world, where they see that it's okay to excuse bad behavior by their peers and not support better education? Please vote to save your children. Reinforcing DEI programs help every child to show up every day without fear of being their own true selves. This is the promise that public school education gives to every child, a safe environment for them to come and study and learn despite whoever they might be. I would also like to add, our staff, our administration, everyone has been working ridiculously hard these last 2 years. And to consider cutting funding for them this year seems to be a very unfair proposition. And I do hope that you will consider funding the schools in a manner that seems appropriate for Darien. Thank you.
Thanks for speaking this evening. Sir, please step up. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Vaibhav Muchal, 369 Middlesex Road. With the spate of incidents that have occurred and continue to occur in all of our schools, I feel there is a persistent attitude that feels pervasive of doing as little as possible to make changes to how we educate our children about other cultures and ways of life. I believe it is time to improve our community, our children, and ourselves. I urge each and every member of this volunteer board to vote to fully fund DEI for the upcoming school year to prepare our children to be able to navigate the global community and economy that they will need to navigate in the future. Thank you.
Thanks for speaking this evening. Anyone else outside? Last call for anyone in the audience before we move over to Zoom. Okay, Michelle, we'll move over to Zoom.
Caroline Comfort, you are unmuted and recognized.
Carolyn, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, great. Good evening. My name is Caroline Comfort. I'm the co-president of the Darien Advocates for the Education of the Gifted, DAEG, and I live at 48 Norotan Ave. I'm here tonight to voice DAEG's support for the administration and for the board's continued commitment to strong academic initiatives and appropriate staffing levels that benefit all students. DAEG supports the expanded offerings at the middle school in this year's recommended budget, including the proposed introduction of Mandarin classes and the proposed Genius Hour elective, as well as new course offerings at the high school. We believe that since they were installed in 2017, the DHS department chairs have played an important role in overseeing continuous curriculum development, enhancing learning for all students, and ensuring that high-quality teaching is consistently delivered at our high school. We remain grateful for the action that has been taken by the administration as a result of last year's gifted program evaluation and the work that the IDEA Steering Committee is currently undertaking to further improve the gifted program. Now, more than ever, we need to continue to support these academic initiatives in the best interest of all of our students. Thank you very much.
Thanks for speaking this evening.
Abigail Hornstein, you are unmuted and recognized.
Can you hear us, Abigail?
Sorry,
Go
my
ahead,
mouse
thank you.
decided to die right then. Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Perfect. So Abigail Hornstein, 17 Edmund Street. Having compassion and empathy for why someone behaves the way they do based on their experiences never means that we have to tolerate that behavior or hold space for it. You can absolutely have compassion and set a boundary, and we need to work together as a community to set boundaries. Let us say loudly and clearly that there are behaviors and words that cannot be and will not be tolerated at school. Last week, this board took the first step in authorizing the DEI consultant. Just as the federal government funds border security, so too must Darien provide the analogous support to provide a safe educational environment for all of our children. Thus, I ask that you fund DEI fully and promptly. The amount of money proposed for DEI expenditures in our budget is not much. On a per resident basis, perhaps a couple bucks. Change the denominator to be only school-age children enrolled in Darien public schools, and it's still less money than lunch for one person anywhere in our town. Of course, some of us know how to eat for free by doing things like going to what we in our house call the Costco buffet of the samples. And we know that some of the DEI work the district could do might not cost all that much, as the consultant and teachers might identify free resources available online or at our wonderful library. But not everything in life that is good comes for free. Most things that are good cost money. DEI and education are goods that are needed, wanted, helpful, and yes, will need money. We need to recognize we get what we pay for. So again, I'm going to conclude by asking that you fund DEI fully and promptly. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for speaking this evening.
Username M. Lee, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hi, we see you. Can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Good. Please proceed. Your name and your address. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for my time. Thank you for your time. My name is Liam Lee. And I live at 7 Berry Lane, and I'm a fourth grader at Tokenique Elementary School. I'm here to speak on the matters of the DEI committee. 2 years ago, when I was in second grade, I encountered these couple of boys in the gang, and I had a couple of friends who were Asian and half Asian. we used to hang out because we were really good friends. And these boys like kept on grouping us and asking if they were we were brothers. And they know, and I feel like they were kind of doing it to get under our skins. And I know that, and I'm sure they know it's uncool to do that, and it's not fair because it's just like they're showing that they don't know this stuff. And cutting budgets for DEI committee is going to help with this matter. Also, when I'm on the bus and I'm talking to my friends, people are like yelling these ignorant comments like, I'm not racist because I eat rice and that stuff, and I'm not racist because I eat ramen and that stuff. I mean, you can't say that because it's not true. People like rice and you're going to eat rice. Also, and when I was in pre-K, one of my earliest memories in pre-K was that like people kept on bullying me and saying, hi, I have Chinese eyes like that. And it's just not cool because you're grouping Asians with these eyes and that stuff. And it's like being unfair to us, and it's just not cool. So the DEI committee will like show people, open up their worldly vision, make them more worldly, show them it's going to educate people more for this for their school. It'll help them through life. So cutting budgets for this DEI committee is not going to help. So thank you for your time. Bye.
Lee, thank you for staying up and for speaking.
Rich Hill, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hi, everyone.
Hill, can you hear us?
I sure can. My name is Richard Hill. I live at 10 Wakeman Road. I'd like to discuss 2 points this evening. First, I want to urge the board to pass the budget with the funds from the DEI consultant included. This is the work the board has overwhelmingly supported in the past. The community, Dr. Adley, and our students have told us it is needed. It is work that is already happening. Please allow this work to continue. Second, I'd like to address last week's vote on the open choice. I recognize it's not on the agenda, and I'm not asking it to be reconsidered. My comments are specifically directed to the board members who had previously expressed support for this program and indicated their openness to the program in the future, but voted against it last week, citing it as not the right time. I have a simple question. What's the right time? What are the parameters for it to be the right time? I'd ask the board going forward that a vote of not now should require guideposts to hold the board accountable for when it is passed. It's potentially a slippery slope intended to avoid a difficult decision. Otherwise, just vote no, stand behind it. Leadership is not doing what's convenient. It's making the hard decision at the inconvenient time. For your time, everyone.
Thanks for speaking this evening.
Teresa Vote, you are recognized and unmuted.
Hi.
Go ahead, Teresa.
Hi, Teresa Vote, 22 Circle Road. I am a member of the RTM Education Committee. I do not speak for the committee, but we did have a meeting last night, which Dr. Adley and several board members attended. At that meeting, I stated that I expect board members tonight to be fully transparent and explain the reasoning behind their cuts or their ads. We did not get that. In fact, with some of the cuts, we only got the number line items. And if you did not have a budget book in front of you, you had no idea what was even being cut. So regardless of whether or not a certain cut or ad, the motion moves forward, I expect to hear the reasoning behind them, particularly the department chairs, the athletic director, an assistant principal at DHS, and Dr. Adley's salary. But moving forward, many of these cuts are not even about budgeting. They seem to be about an agenda. Majority of the cuts impact curriculum and DEI, and not approving open choice falls into that category. We hear time and again that this board cares about social emotional learning, and yet your cuts tell me the exact opposite. Curriculum, DEI training, and open choice all play a role in SEL. They are not mutually exclusive. So the excuse is that we need to return to normal or we need to focus on remediation. Your cuts actually do the opposite. There is a new normal. And that new normal is a world that embraces diversity, equity, and inclusion. And improving the mental health of our students impacted by the pandemic, that too embraces diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our goal as parents and the job of our educators is to prepare Darien students for the world outside of our borders. These cuts prevent us from achieving that goal and in fact put our children at a disadvantage. If your cuts stand, Darien and its children will be left behind. Thank you.
Thanks for speaking this evening.
Emily Bryan, you are unmuted and recognized.
Thank you. My name is Emily Bryan, and I live at 1 Oxridge Lane in Darien, Connecticut. Thank you for having me. Thank you to the board for all the work you do throughout the year. I'm speaking today because I support the administration's plan for diversity, equity, and inclusion in the schools. I'd like to ask you to have faith that your administration is responding to the needs of your students. Colleges and workplaces across the country are committed to programs of diversity, equity, and inclusion. In not voting for this, you do the students in this town a disservice if you do not provide the skills of interpersonal relationships that their next steps on their journey will require. Do not be afraid of change. Loving your neighbor is not about caring for the person who is just like you. It's about caring for the stranger. Don't imagine that you're preserving some idyllic version of this town. If you've lived here for 50 years like me and been through the educational system, you'll know it's always been a work in progress. Together we can be better, more just, more fair, more welcoming. Maybe you don't like the details of this plan, then make some recommendations, but don't put down the proposal or the funding. Recognize the skill of your administration and support them. Recognize the experience of your teachers and support them. Recognize the requests of your students and respond to them. As a taxpayer in this town, that is what I would like my Board of Education to do. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for speaking this evening.
Dwayne Morgan, you are unmuted and recognized.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Dwayne. Go ahead.
My name is Dwayne Morgan, and I live at 35 Hamilton Lane with 2 fifth graders at Oxridge and 1 going to kindergarten there next year. I'm speaking in opposition to any budget cuts related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. In today's multicultural world, I struggle to think of anything more important than being able to work together with individuals from different backgrounds. I've listened to members of the board, Dr. Adley, parents in town fight for DEI week after week. I can't believe we have to fight for this. Look at the college websites of schools we hope our children attend. Each and every one of them are making DEI a priority. Look at the companies where they will hopefully someday work. Corporate America is making DEI a priority. Yet we are here fighting to keep $69,000 in the budget to help prepare our kids for the world they are growing up in. The second our children leave DHS, they will immediately find themselves in a situation where they will be living with, studying with, learning with, working with people who look differently, talk differently, think differently, worship differently than they do. They need to be prepared for that to happen. They need to be able to discuss important topics and work in a team setting with people who don't look, think, and worship exactly the way they do. It is something that is learned. We know our kids aren't learning it because on a regular basis here in Darien, we find swastikas being graffitied on school property or a white power symbol showing up on a high school or social media post. Aren't we tired of the ignorance? Don't we want our children to be better than that? We need to start wanting better because the rest of the country, colleges, and workplaces are demanding our children be better. Darien has been a town of exclusion for long enough. If you don't listen to Dr. Adley, the CDSP, our teachers, then listen to our students. I know you all remember when the students came before the board this fall and spoke about their mistreatment at DHS. Those brave students were some of our best and brightest. The hatred they described brought tears to many people in attendance and watching at home. That was a cry for help from our students who recognized the need for this program. Don't let our kids down tonight. I can't imagine a single person watching tonight walking into their offices tomorrow and announcing they're against diversity, they're against equity, they're against inclusion. The proposed budget cuts do exactly that. Being cultured is never a bad thing. Being kind to others who are different is never a bad thing. Please give these dedicated educators the small amount of money they need to address this major problem that we have, so our children are prepared when they leave
We're
Darien.
at time, Mr. Morgan.
Thank you.
Thanks for speaking.
Tiffany O'Connor, you are unmuted and recognized.
Tiffany, can you hear us? We can't hear you. Looks like you're still on mute.
Okay,
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead,
Thank
Tiffany.
you.
Thank you.
thanks. I wasn't actually planning to speak tonight. I thought I had written everything I wanted to share with the board in a letter that I emailed to all of you today. But at the end of my letter, I mentioned briefly that I hoped you all wouldn't support the last minute proposed cuts to DHS, including the assistant principal, director of technology, department chairs, and other cuts that had not been discussed publicly. I didn't bother to elaborate in the email because I actually wasn't sure whether to even address those cuts at all in my letter, mainly because, well, they are so absurd, as was the process, that I can't imagine the board, or at least 8 of you, even taking them seriously. I still can't imagine it, but this afternoon I was surprised to hear that some of the other board members may actually be considering the proposed cut of an assistant principal. As the DHSPA co-chairs explained in their speech last week, 3 assistant principals are very much needed, given the size of the DHS student body, and our current staffing aligns with the staffing ratios for this position at other schools in our DIRG. I'd like to give you the complete job descriptions of the assistant principals, but I can't do that in under 3 minutes. Similarly, I don't have time to share all of the responsibilities of the director of technology, but will simply reiterate that this is a crucial position to facilitate and integrate technology for the learning in all of our schools. Nor can I share the responsibilities or even all the ways the department chairs have improved curriculum consistency in under 3 minutes. 3 minutes is not a lot of time. Yet, in these few minutes, I've already talked more about these positions than the board member who proposed to cut all of them. He explained why he proposed the cuts and how they would affect the schools for exactly 0 minutes. Looking for the efficiencies in the budget is smart, but randomly making cuts with no discussion is not. I truly hope the board's consideration of the assistant principal cut or any of the last minute, thoughtless, unexplained cuts is just rumor. Please take the time to investigate, ask questions, and discuss these important roles before considering any changes. Darien High School has a long tradition of academic excellence, and the people who fill these positions, these critical positions, are a big part of that. Please don't let one reckless board member dismantle the high school on a whim. Thank you.
Thanks for speaking this evening.
Armel Jacobs, you are unmuted and recognized.
Armel, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead. Thank you.
I want to start just by saying thank you to, see, I'm already going. Thank you to Liam Lee, who was such a brave little kid. I mean, I'm so in awe that he got on this call and told his stories. And I hope that the people on the board are hearing his call to action. And I think everyone on this call who also thinks he did a good job should raise their hand and say so, because that kid, as far as I'm concerned, is like a tiny little hero in our town, and it should be celebrated. I also want to direct my comments, like Mr. Hill, I want to direct my comments to the 5 who voted down choice, in particular, the ones who flip-flopped. What I want to say is that, you know, it hit the news. And if you go to the sort of Facebook posts where all of these various, you know, the Current posted their article, the Stanford Advocate, if you scroll down, you know, you can read the comments and, you know, you don't have to take my word for it. You can ask Mr. Sini, because I saw him in those comments too, talking about it and explaining his choice, which I applaud you for. Thank you for being transparent. But I'm sure he saw that what they say about our town is not good. It is, Our reputation is so bad for being hospitable. Darien, where the D is silent. Didn't you know? What did you expect? It's Darien. Everyone thinks of us as being, like Dan Guller said, inhospitable. And I guess my question, and not inclusive, my question for Ms. Worm and Mr. Maroney and Ms. McCammon and Mr. Sini and Mr. Brown is, are they right? Are they right? Because these proposed cuts, the direction where they want to take us, it's not moving forward. You must know that. It's taking us backward. It is fulfilling this idea that we are a very inhospitable, closed place. I want you to ask yourselves if they're right about what they say about us when you consider whether you're funding DEI more in the future. I think what Krista said is right on. It's about values. And I'm not here to shame you. I'm here to beg you. I'm here to beg you. Can you please take us forward and not backward? Because if you're bending to the will of the 1,000 that signed a petition.
Mel, you're at time this evening.
Okay, you get what I'm saying. Help
Thanks.
us go forward.
Thank you.
Danielle, you are unmuted and recognized.
Hang on.
Danielle,
Am I
can you
there?
hear us? Or, yep.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Thank you. Name and address.
Oh, hi. Danielle Yu. I live at 14 Lighthouse Way. I have 3 kids that have gone through the Darien Public Schools. One is in college now, one is in the high school, and I have one at Henley. I may set the record for having the most years at Henley. I have never done one of these before, and I just wanted to have my voice out there saying that I agree with everything that's been said by all these wonderful speakers before me. I support Dr. Adley's budget as it is without the cuts. I especially would like to emphasize the need for DEI funding. My children are half Asian, and when I heard little Liam speak about some of his experience, it reminded me of some of the experiences that they had when they were younger. And I think given the things that have happened in town recently, we do have a need for DEI. And I hope that you will consider not cutting it at all. And then on another note, I would just like to thank Dr. Adley for everything he's done for our town for the last 2 years. He's worked incredibly hard. It's been a very difficult time. Thank you and your staff. I can't imagine what you go through having to stand up there every week and get the vitriol of some people. And thank you very much for all you do. And thank you to the board for taking the time, because I can see that it's multiple hours every week. Thank you.
Thanks for speaking this evening.
Louise Waylip Brown, you are unmuted and recognized.
Louise, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So I'm looking down because I'm reading from my laptop. The effect of voting no on open choice. Mrs. Worm, I know you're passionate about 9th grade gifted and talented idea programme and their projects and competition entries. Sadly, since you voted no on open choice, you'll be prevented from seeing a bright Norwalk Darien kindergartner class of 2022 who will be in the 9th grade class of 2031-32 from being able to write an essay on their diversity experience within their own school. Essays which other IDEA students around the country are already submitting for national competitions. Now, that's now. Our Darien students won't even be able to submit those entries 10 years from now because of your vote no. Mr. Sini, As chair of the Board of Ed Budget Committee, you are fully aware of the 36,000 net revenue builder that Open Choice would have given our town with busing and special ed provided by the sending district. Not costs, but revenue. You are also aware of the 99% build that that already exists in our town. Our school district has had a 5-year downward trend in enrolment. 156 students 5 years ago that would take 30 students additional every year for the next 5 years just to get back to the enrollment that we had 5 years ago. It is absolute BS to talk about increased enrollment. We've already been there. The Darien Town Budget and Finance Committee is, and I quote, largely in support of Open Choice. If you are indeed re-elected to the Board of Education, Mr. Senior, in November, I hope you follow through on your interest to revisit Open Choice. Finally, please bear with me, Duke. I have a suggestion about how the board discusses proposed budget cuts, because I think it would save a lot of time and it would be way more informative to constituents. I'd like to make a request for budget season 22-23 that when a Board of Education member proposes a budget cut, that they add a line of justification and explanation alongside the budget sheets they submit, since we the constituents aren't given any rationale for each cut. For example, one board member, Mr. Brown, proposed at least 20 budget cuts this season, one of which a 10% cut of our superintendent's salary. That after 2 years of guiding 5,000 students and hundreds of staff through a pandemic while we currently have an inflation rate of 7%, I find that cut to be reckless and disrespectful. Thank goodness other board members thought the proposal to be ludicrous and threw it out. Dr. Adley has done an outstanding job since he arrived in our district, and the Board of Ed's goal, and I quote, is to establish and maintain solid, respectful working relationships with the
Louise,
students.
you're at time.
Please,
Thank you for speaking.
one second. Let's hope he and his team choose to stay.
Deb, you are unmuted and recognized.
Deb, can you hear us?
I can hear you. I apologize. I'm in the car. Thank
Yes,
you.
we
My
can hear
name
you.
is Deb
Name-
Danielle. My name is Deb Danielle. I live at 66 Middlesex Road. I had no intention of speaking tonight, but I have to say how surprised and actually disappointed I am at all the finger pointing going on here. I think we had numerous board meetings on open choice. We heard from the town residents, and I think the board voted the way they did based on all the comments that they received. I don't think that it was something that was thought of last minute. I want to thank the board for all the hard work that they have done and considering all the residents' opinions, but I don't think that any board member should be forced or made to be persuaded from what their decision was. And I don't think that that's right. I think as a town, we have gone in the wrong direction. We are negative and we are unkind to each other. And I think that that needs to stop because that is what we are showing the children. That is what the children are seeing. That is all I'd like to comment on. Thank you.
Thanks for speaking this evening.
Peter Orphanos, you are unmuted and recognized.
Peter, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you. Peter Orphanos, I live at 67 Raymond Street. It's been my pleasure to appear before the board to advocate many things, going as either as a private person, as a member of CDSP formerly, and also now as a member of the RTM. I have heard many reasons presented supporting the open choice and DEI initiatives have been presented at great length, and I will not go over them again. I would like to thank Mr. Hill for his comment about when is the right time. I said, would like to affirm that position, which is if we're not going to look at it now, when are we going to look at it? I believe that that's something we need to be asking ourselves. But after reflecting on this issue at length, The question I have to ask, I asked the board and other people to ask themselves rhetorically, what about open choice and DEI do we seem to be afraid of? There seems to be a sort of an undefined fear of, well, what could happen? Something bad could happen. This may not go the way we like it to go. It could be, might be an expense down the road. Because I really haven't had any real rational basis for not proceeding with these initiatives. I think that the vote has done is to teach our kids that love thy neighbor as thyself ends at our town line. I think that is, I'm profoundly disappointed in that that situation. And I think, unfortunately, we've diminished the town and our district. Thank you.
Thanks for speaking this evening.
Paula Sardoni, you are unmuted and recognized.
Paula,
Hi.
can you hear us?
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, just have a couple things I have to tap before I go on. So I'm speaking tonight just to remind everyone. I'm sorry, unfortunately, you're hearing a lot of negative comments of a lot of people criticizing the budget as is right now. But I would like to support the board on the decision they have made in the last week. And thank you so much for all your work on this, all the hours you have put into it. And all our kids in our schools are very thankful. Thank you.
Thanks for speaking.
There are no more raised hands at this time.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Thank you for everyone that's in the building, and thank you for everyone that's been on Zoom for speaking this evening. We will move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Adley.
Good evening, everyone. Those people who are online and in person. And ironically enough, just given some of the topics we've spoken about, our elementary schools will be celebrating kindness over the next 2 weeks. Various read aloud, writing activities, food drive for person to person, food pantry, and other activities. Feel free to stop by the Neat Coffee Shop on Monday, where you will get a cup of coffee and with a sleeve decorated by some of our students around kindness. Congratulations and thanks to everyone who supported the Henley PTO, including our facilities, our PTO members for our story walk. It is installed. It goes around the side of the building. So the first book will be by the author Amanda Gorman, Change Things, Change Things. And we'll get this up and running, and you'll be able to go around there and see that storybook. Thanks to the efforts of our Henley librarian, Jackie Hyde, for making this a reality. Congratulations to the kids in Middlesex. So they had to defer the screening of Cinderella because of the storm. And so congratulations on completing the musical, the 2 shows last Saturday. Elementary schools have celebrated World Aloud Day last Wednesday with guest speakers and virtual visiting authors focusing on books with global themes, cultures, and settings. And Tokenique had 2 enrichment programs featuring Korean and Chinese dancers as they celebrated the Lunar New Year. Our Tokenique 4th graders participated today in NAEP testing, that is the National Assessment of Educational Progress. And tomorrow our middle schoolers will participate, our 8th graders will participate in the respective tests for their grade level. 5th grade Parents Night is going to be by Zoom on February 16th at 6:30 p.m. And a Zoom link will go out to parents, 5th grade parents on Monday. The last unofficial day for students at this particular point, given the traditional snow days that we've had, is Friday, June 17th. I know there's no one's more disappointed, so to speak, when a snow call or a weather thing doesn't work out. But in some ways, I guess I'm glad in some ways that we don't have to deal with it. But I just want to let people know that process starts. Depending, every storm, every situation is a wee bit different. Some may start the night before, where we contact our local officials. I'm watching every news station I can get, every projection online that I can get, but it really kicks into gear mostly at 4 o'clock the next morning. We're in contact with the Darien Public Works at Gentile, who does a super job for us. We're in contact with the bus company to see or even drivers get into work. Local superintendents join in, and we meet with the meteorologist at that time in the morning too at 4:10. So the decision's made somewhere around about 4:30. Mr. Lynch is in contact about the roads around here and also the state of our buildings. So those are all the inputs that go into it. And honestly, simply put, safety, the safety of our staff and students are just paramount in that decision. And they all don't go according to plan. I'm not a meteorologist, but we do the best we can under the circumstances. And no, we have staff who travel a long distance. We've had staff actually get in road accidents and so on and so forth over one of the last storms. But we make the best judgment we can. But we have a lot of people who travel, and that impacts things. But ultimately, the safety of our kids and our staff are really what guides the decision. And some of them haven't worked out just recently as projected, but such is life a little bit. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but I'll be happy to answer them. Friday the 18th, we have a
Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown, oh, hi.
Just a quick follow-up on that, Ellen. In terms of, teachers who have to travel a long way and working parents we have in town, and knowing that sometimes we get it right, sometimes we get it wrong, why wouldn't we lean towards just calling it the night before and, hopefully we get it right? I mean, I don't know, do we have more accuracy in the morning, or I know we've missed a couple recently. I don't know if anyone tracks this or does the stats, but it would just seem, if you have childcare coverage for, our staff and for, working parents, why wouldn't we just air and make it sooner? I don't know if that would make a big difference in the outcome. Just curious to the philosophy.
If I had a certain confidence level that something's going to happen, it wouldn't be the first time that I'd call it the night before. But I tend to think things change here pretty quickly, as you can attest to, right? So I don't want to rule out the opportunity of having school. So if I can wait till the morning, I would wait till the morning. It would have to be as a slam dunk decision that I could make it the night before. And if that's the case, that's fine. If we were going to get slammed and as predicted, but it's so unpredictable at times that I want to give it every opportunity to change. Friday the 18th is Professional Development Day. It's also the second makeup day for Henley, so there will be an early release for the Henley students, and the teachers then at the latter part of the afternoon will participate in professional development. That's mostly within departments. And then Friday the 21st to the 25th is President's Day, and it's the February recess, and we wish everyone a safe and enjoyable recess.
All right. We'll move on to approval of minutes. May I have a motion to approve the following minutes of the special meeting and the regular meeting held on January 25th, 2022, and minutes of the special meeting held on February 1st, 2022. May I have a motion, Mr. Maroney, second by Mrs. McCammon. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Move on to any board committee reports. Mrs. Parent.
The curriculum committee met Thursday, January 27th. We discussed K-2 literacy and music. And I just want to give a nice quick little thank you to the teachers that let us look into their classrooms, and the children that shared some of their work with us through those presentations. It was a really nice reminder that there actually is some really nice and excellent teaching and learning happening in this district. So thank you to them. And we will have our next meeting on February 17th.
Thank you, Mrs. Parent. Any other board committee reports? We'll move on to presentations and discussions. Darien Public School update, Dr. Adley.
So the COVID metrics here, obviously everybody's probably focused on the governor's speech and press conference yesterday, and so I do have an update from that incorporated into this update that I'm giving the board at the moment. So I think it's suffice to say that the metrics within the town and within the school have been very, very favorable. The COVID rate within the town is 5.5, and that's down from 17.57 from last week. This gives you a little bit of a sense of where we have been to, if you look at like cases reported out even from 1.3 right down to 2.3, you can see that the dramatic drop that is occurring. And that's good. That's good to see. We're pleased about that, obviously. These just the monthly reports. I'm sure that January one, I'm just looking at that January one is right, Michelle, to be honest with you, just upon a review of that. I'll just double check that January one. And so here you can see the drop. So with, oops, I'll just go back to this for you. So with our rates that we have in the school, so there's over 99% of the staff, the complete staff, right? Not just teachers, just complete staff are vaccinated. The 12 to 17-year-olds, we have over 99% of the kids are vaccinated. The 5 to 11 years of age, there's 55% of those students have been vaccinated against a state number of 34. So even though it's low or perceivably low given as opposed to the 99, it's still relatively high for the state. And those are students we know have the lowest risk factor of getting significantly ill in any capacity. So yesterday's, well, I'll go down this in order, I guess. Mitigation strategies, we changed some mitigation strategies. So last week, last Friday, we shared with the parents that we would be transitioning into normal lunches again. And again, none of these decisions are made in isolation. They're all under consultation with our medical team, and those were reflected in the numbers and also what's happening or not happening in hospitals and the sickness of kids and so on and so forth. So they felt comfortable moving back to that normal setting. That is happening this week. Some of the schools have already transitioned. Many of the elementary schools have already transitioned. It is much noisier in their lunchrooms right now. But the kids are glad to be back together. The middle school, given that there was a lot of transition had to take place because it's up in the gym and those tables need to be brought back down, so on and so forth. So they will be transitioning in tomorrow. The high school has closed one of the gyms down. The other gym, they're actually going to leave that open because some of our ninth graders actually, if they want to go in there, they can't go in there. There's a socialization there that they may feel just as comfortable in there. So we've opened those normal processes up. That was done in advance of the governor's discussion yesterday. So you heard from the governor's discussion that on February 28th, he's going to give local municipalities the discretion to make that decision. I will say that the correspondence that the board did had some impact. I won't say at what level of impact, but it was, they responded to that and asked up some follow-up questions. So certainly the things that we've asked for, we've resulted in. So it's important that we address those, obviously. And meeting today, we had a meeting today with our medical advisors and our team, Emily, Dr. Kenefek, and David. And I want to thank them again publicly for all the work that they have done, and Alicia too, to bring us this far. So I will just share with you that given our rates of where we are, the team feels comfortable that on the 28th, we would transition to an optional mask wearing for staff and for students. So that is the direction that we would be going. I would say that there are a few caveats to that. One of them is that students currently would still have to wear a mask on a bus because the federal regulations oversees the local regulations, that's the CDC, because from flights on airplanes to public transportation, it includes school transportation. The Department of Public Health and the State Department of Education, they still have to work out some guidelines. So they have indicated, if you saw the conference, they have indicated that they're going to give us some guidance. I don't know what that looks like. If it's anything like the Christmas guidance, it will be the night off or the day off. I can't rely on being on time, that's for sure, right? And we have the February break coming up and so on and so forth. So we do need to sort of see kind of what those guidelines are actually going to be, because they may give us some other parameters. But at this point, we'll be moving ahead with removing the mask for those who want to, recommending if anyone wants to keep it, They keep it, we continue to say for our younger kids and anybody else who needs to be vaccinated, that continues to be the recommendation. But anyone who feels that they would like to continue to wear the mask, we put that in place. There are other things that are open though for discussion, and we need some guidance on it. And I can't really answer tonight. One is what happens to a student or a staff member who is quarantined. They essentially currently have come back after the 5 days, but they come back with social distancing and then they come back with a mask wearing, right? I personally can't see them. This is me just talking as a layperson. I think they're going to have to, if they're going to come back, it's going to be very difficult to imagine that they're going to have to wear a mask, because just given if the decision to not wear masks or to optionally wear masks, it's just going to be interesting. So they're going to have to sort of come out and tell us some guidance around that particular issue. Don't forget that all these strategies, including the mask and the strategy we have in school right now, are all predicated on us wearing masks, right? So everything that's being done, all the mitigation of the suite, which actually I think our medical team would say that's been instrumental in getting us as far as we are at this particular point. And in many ways, our rates are just, if the same way I've said on other topics from open choice, if we can't do it, nobody, I don't know who can do it, because our rates are such that we should be able to make these decisions now. But there are some things that I can't just give answers to, and I know parents might want the answers to. Fundamentally, we'll be transitioning to an optional opportunity for students to wear masks. That's the good news, I think. But there are some other issues that are just an open agenda at this particular point, and you may have questions yourself, actually. So I'll just keep going just for a second, and then we'll open up the floor if that's okay. Oh, okay, go ahead.
If it's okay, Mr. Chair, please stop it. What you just covered.
Sure.
On the new.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
So 2 questions. Do we have enough N95 for staff that would want to use them in the classroom?
We have thousands of N95s.
Okay. And then Dr. Adley, when you speak about local control, and again, I know this is brand new news and there were hearings today, but Dr. Juthani, I think is her name, stated that elected school boards will make the call. In previous times, it was you in consultation with the health professionals, but this was very different language than I've heard in the past. Do you have any color on that, or shall we wait?
Sure. The governor said superintendents will make it along with mayors. Honestly, our policy, like the policy we have, you could read the policy both ways in terms of the superintendent, just an administration, just apprising the board and advising the board on it, or the board making that decision. It says possible action if the board wants to do that. Look, I don't want to get into a he said, she said about this particular issue, right? I'm happy enough to go forward with, well, one of the things you're going to have to think about, I'm happy enough going forward with the recommendation. To this point, and the board has been very supportive of making administrative decisions along the way, right? And being reactive to those. I think we're just going to have to be careful over the next 2 weeks or so, because those are going to come, well, they may come or they may not come. So you're going to have to make a decision as to react to that in real time, or to come together again to make a decision.
Yeah, and if I may just follow up, I would just urge us all to watch as the language gets issued. To your point, Mr. Chairman, be ready, willing, and able to call a meeting at any time.
Yeah.
But let's make sure we watch the language too, because it was a very subtle but strong tone shift around the elected officials making this decision this time versus the last time.
We'll continue to monitor it and maybe pray for some clarity. Mrs. Ackman.
So I would stress what Mr. Sini is saying. The language I have seen makes it a BOE decision and an elected decision, versus during the pandemic when SDE directed that the BOE had no role, it was the superintendent. But this language and this policy has been pretty explicit. I read it the same way Mr. Sini did, that it is a BOE decision. So I just want to support, if that's the decision that the health director and superintendents want to go, that we have the ability to convene and do it. So people don't start arguing, well, the BOE doesn't vote, I'm not doing it. Like, I just want to be clear. So whatever decision we make, if we need to convene, we do. And at the moment, the policy that I read is very different than early in the pandemic and now includes elected officials.
So we'll continue to watch that and we'll convene as necessary to stay on target with the February 28th day. That would be our goal, I believe. Any additional board questions or comments?
So the CIC guidelines, they return to practice and so on and so forth is we got the 5 days. So that's kind of what's going to be in place. We've opened up the spectators for CIAC. CIAC has also asked the Department of Public Health by February 10th if it would allow basically their recommendation of all the sports teams to not wear masks. So I don't know where that's going to go, but given the fact that the Department of Public Health have sort of supported or will be supporting through the legislation the February 28th deadline, so they may just extend that. I don't know, but that's on the table at the moment. And our spectators here have opened up for visitor guidelines. Just at the current time for visitor guidelines, like for instance, the 5th grade, the parent night at the middle school, we have over like 300 families or so. Squeezing 300 families in there, there's some parents who don't want to do that, right? And still feel uncomfortable in some capacities. So I don't want them to force them to do that. So we'll continue to, before this actual date of February 28th, to continue to manage those situations on a one-to-one sort of scenario. We did have, Tara, I think the last time you'd asked to clarify about this particular meeting, yes, the building here, we are wearing masks. Executive Order 13A, if you may remember that there was clarification or confusion around the idea of either being not vaccinated or not being able to sit 6 feet apart, or there was confusion around even if you were vaccinated and couldn't 6 feet apart, and you still had to wear masks. Under advisement, council advisement, we had said that we would move in this direction and also in support of the actual staff. Executive Order 14A has moved this forward, kept it in place until February 15th. So after February 15th, you essentially could go back to pre-COVID days in terms of how we operate. I might just say if we would just wait till the same, you can consider just waiting to the same time as February 28th. But that's just, if you're asking for a technical answer back, that's the technical answer back. There also came up a discussion about, are our kids really eating in hallways? Just in schools per se, they have been so isolated examples, and essentially they haven't been sitting alone per se. Particularly for the students who are just coming back and there are different regulations for lunchtime that they have to be 6 feet apart. They would never be sort of set by themselves. They would have someone maybe at the end of the table, a companion. That's currently what's happening right now. So basically, they've been so isolated, I can probably count them on one hand. There's other ways that we sort of solve that problem. We're going to have to still continue to try to rationalize that. We're doing that now. If someone comes back after 5 days, try to put them with the partner. That's not in place now because we're back into the normal lunchroom setting, but that was just another response to that question. Anyway, those are the big announcements. St. Luke and the United Methodist will have, there is vaccination clinics and booster clinics coming up for 5 and 11-year-olds. So that's an opportunity for people if they would like or need to partake or looking for an area to get a vaccination or a booster shot.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Adley. So as soon as we hear more news from one of your calls or meetings, we'll communicate that out to the board and see what we need to do in terms of making that decision official.
We may or may not, Mr. Chairman, we may or may not, there may come a time where we just have to call a meeting because
yes,
we may or may not have any more information.
That's fine. Mr. Maroney.
I have 2 questions, Dr. Adley. One is the masks on buses. I realize this is not under our control and purview, but what will happen if a student gets on a bus without a mask?
Well, we try and work with that student. We try and work with the family as best as we possibly can. As students, look, the bus driver cannot become
the
police of the mass. It's distracting and so on and so forth. But ultimately, a student, if he refuses to work when he's on the bus, right? the most part, what happens is we tell the administration on the other end, if he refuses to get on, well, we're not going to move until you get it on. You got to put it on. As simple as that.
Okay.
But most times, if there is an issue, it's really because a student, for whatever reason, just can't keep it on or won't keep it on during the time of it. And then when they get to school, they simply report that. We don't. Like we've been in this long enough.
I just think it's going to be difficult to explain the logic to a young child and even a 50-year-old adult of why you need a mask on a bus and you don't need it in school, and you don't. It just makes illogical sense to me, but that's a different point. My other point is for the guidance and when we get that. To me, that's very important. Of if cases begin to spike, I think we need to be clear to our public of what would constitute masks being brought back and mitigation efforts being brought back. And to me, I think that's paramount for us to have that as we go into this and not write it as we go along. Because I mean, we'd be out of compliance today with our COVID metrics, with the heat map, and we've been out of compliance the entire time we've been in school. So I think we need to be clear as what those metrics are and which would constitute going back to masks.
So I think the governor said yesterday, if zombie crone appears or some other variation of this, but without being tongue in cheek about it, our medical team has said that if there was another outbreak, another strand of this, depending on the severity of it, the acuity of it, the hospitalization, the pressure on the health system, all what might seem extreme things right now, perhaps, but the specific metrics, Mr. Ronnie, I don't know how specific they are going to give it, but our team itself are just describing it as those variables together and analyzing those variables as they show up. But I would imagine it'll have to be pretty significant.
Do the bus drivers have a supply of masks on the bus to potentially hand out?
I think they have.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Thank you all for that discussion, and we look forward to moving forward with that. We'll move on to discussion and possible acceptance of contemplated gift from the Darien Youth Lacrosse. Mr. Christopher Manfredonia. You with us, Mr. Manfredonia?
He is.
Go ahead, Chris. We can see
Hi,
you.
guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Dean. So you have here in front of you, the board has seen in the past a donation, very generous donation from the Darien Youth Lacrosse Association in the amount of $6,400 total, $3,200 each to both the boys and girls high school program. And that money will go to offset the cost of filming for both those programs at all three levels, freshman, JV, and varsity for the upcoming spring season.
All right, thank you, Mr. Manfredonia. A little tough hearing you there, but any questions from the board perspective? Mrs. Ackman.
Hi, Mr. Manfredoni, where are we on Huddle? And I only asked just so that we're not asking parents to raise money for taping when we have Huddle. I'm very appreciative of the gift, happy to accept it, but just wondering where we are on our Huddle filming.
So we do have the Huddle stadium camera installed. It is ready for use and ready for taping. We still will probably have some of our lacrosse games taped. That's certainly that are not in the stadium. But we do have the capacity to now film games or practices in the stadium with the Huddle camera.
All right, great. Thank you.
Good. Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Manfredonia. May I have a motion to accept the gift from the Darien Youth Lacrosse in the amount of $6,400 for boys and girls lacrosse to be used to offset filming costs? Mrs. Best, second by Mrs. Ackman. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Manfredonia, and thank the Darien Youth Lacrosse for the generosity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Janine.
We'll move on to discussion and possible approval of proposed Middlesex field trips. Mr. Chris Tranberg and Ms. Carolyn Rodriguez.
Good evening. We have 2 field trips for consideration, but it's actually only 1 field trip now. The March 11th and 12th trip has filled up. So there is no space if the trip was approved. But I have Ms. Rodriguez is here to talk about the trip to Chicago.
Yes, good evening.
The trip to Chicago is one of the national championships that the Quiz Bowl prepares for all year. This year it's in May and it is in Chicago. Every student that is attending to compete would have a chaperone attend with them. And the field trip lists out how they would leave on a Friday and return on a Monday. So students and staff would have 2 days that they could possibly miss, but they would be competing as different teams within this against the other Quiz Bowls for a national championship.
Good.
I
Thank
also have Ken Romeo if there's any questions. He is the Quiz Bowl advisor, so I have him online too.
Great. Thank you. No, it's always an exciting program and they always do so well with the program. So it's exciting to support it. May I have a motion to approve the proposed Middlesex Quiz Bowl field trips, March 11th through 12th to Ellicott City, Maryland. That is the one we're talking about.
No, the Chicago one.
We're talking about the Chicago one. May I have a motion to approve the proposed Middlesex Quiz Bowl field trip on May 6th through the 9th, 2022 to Chicago, Illinois. Chicago, Illinois. Mrs. Ackman, second by Mr. Sini. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Wish them luck and continue with that great program. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carolyn.
We will move on to the update on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Mr. Tranberg.
Good evening again, everyone. Just a brief memo with some updates. First, February is Black History Month, so there are celebrations and recognitions happening across the schools. That doesn't mean that we only study Black history during the month of February, but it's a time for intentionality and celebration about those contributions and innovation. So there's different events happening. At the high school, they're preparing for the Names Can Really Hurt Us program. So there is a training coming up in March for program implementation coming in April. The middle school has its Gay Straight Alliance. The GSA is up and running. And they're also working on additional visual representations that are happening around the building. So in the packet, you'll see some of the bulletin boards. Our DEI team is scheduled for February 28th. We're looking forward to launching that group. The committee members will receive notification on the 28th if they're on the DEI team or one of the networks associated with the DEI team. Mr. Shelton will be here to launch that team and provide do some work with teachers and also work with student leadership on February 28th, March 1st and 2nd. He was also here for our professional development day on Friday, the 14th, and he worked with all teachers in their respective groups of elementary, middle school, and high school. We also are working with there's been a request to work on gender identity and expression, the laws that go with that and the language. So we're going to look at having someone work with the administrators to make sure they're as up to date as possible and then decide how to proceed with providing some support for teachers in that area as well.
Thank you, Mr. Tranberg. Mr. Sini.
Chris, did you say the 28th, you're going to notify committee members?
By this Thursday.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this Thursday you'll notify.
Yes, this Thursday is the 10th. So people will know on the 10th and the meeting is the 28th.
And then my second follow-up is in terms of the plan, we've discussed COVID kind of put us behind. Is there any way you could give us an indication where we are in terms of implementation of plan and where we should be given where the strategic plan kind of had forecast?
Absolutely. So as far as professional development goes, as you know, we have limited amount of scheduled professional development, and those days have happened this year. So any other professional development would be working with teams of teachers and individual groups. As far as the DEI team, it's a later launch than expected. So our deliverables this year, we're coming to an equity statement that would represent the team completing the equity audit, and then just those opportunities to engage in conversations. And honestly, I would say to demystify what is DEI. And I think we can still do that work, especially if we can get that statement done. That's an important goal this year. And we planned on working with student leadership on 2 separate occasions, and we're still going to be able to make that happen as well.
So when do you think we could get back on plan? Sometime next year, you think? Next school year, I should say.
Back on plan. I think the work is ongoing. And so when we talk about DEI as an initiative, I just think it's more about a lens. I think when we're saying it's an initiative, it sounds like it's this giant change. We're really just trying to put language around some of the good practices that we already do and identify where we do need to make some shifts. So it's not big, it's not ominous. It's work that frankly we've been doing, and there are some changes we can make to do it better. But as far as on track, I would say next year would be, if we can gain some momentum and continue the work into next year, I think we could be in a better place for
Next
sure.
school year, you're
Yes.
talking. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Seeley.
Not to be, no, I'm not being controversial about it, but I'm just saying, like, we're behind, like, we're months behind where we were, and trying to work with our kids and our staff. So I just wanted to note that.
Mrs. Best.
Thank you. Chris, could you just tell us a little bit more about the Anti-Defamation League program? The names can really hurt us. Just a few more sentences to remind us.
Sure. I've experienced the program as a principal, and so this is based on, it hasn't changed drastically, but the Anti-Defamation League comes in, trains up a group of students, because when the program itself happens, they provide a space for students to talk about some of the challenges they experience. And you need a group of student facilitators who can not only be a support during the program itself, but follow through. They can be part of the upstanders, for lack of a better description. So when they're hearing things that need to be addressed, they can step up and do that. So it's really about environment, space, and identifying challenges.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Best. Mrs. Ackman.
Mr. Tranberg, some of this work, as you notice, is stuff we've done, right? I mean, some of what's gone on at the high school and is listed as going on at the high school has gone on to the high school for a number of years. So as you meet with this leadership forum, are you talking to the kids about whether they feel they need more, they need less, they need different? Because I think, to your good point, some of this is the stuff we're done, and maybe the board is seeing the memo the first time and the public is seeing for the first time, but you know, American change makers and library displays of the contributions have happened. So what's different, I guess? Or what are you looking for the kids to hear what they need different, what they want to see different?
I would say an important part of the work right now is definitely hearing from students, and the program shapes itself to what the needs are of that population. So the program itself is adaptable. The big difference, I would say, and bulletin boards are a great example, because bulletin boards, it's an easy step to take, because you can put up a bulletin board and not ever talk about it. So the next step that's different is we're trying to provide the space to actually talk about it on top of it. One of the shifts that's happening with DEI is just providing space for conversations, and space for conversations to not make everyone agree about anything and to not feed into confirmation bias, but to navigate a difficult conversation. I learned that way too late. My dad and I see the world very differently. I love my dad, and I go visit my dad, and we can talk about really difficult things because we've learned how to have those conversations. That's a skill that we can help prepare kids to do right now. We need to, divergent thought is fine, but civility is important, and we get good at it when we practice. And if we are not practicing having those conversations, we certainly don't ever get better at them.
Thank you.
Mrs. McCammon.
I found this memo very helpful. Thank you very much. And I was looking at the beginning of it, and it looks like we've been talking about DEI about every other month. And so this is just a request. If I recognize it's some work to put it together, but because it's an area of focus and it's a relatively new area of work, if we could continue to get an update about every other month, I think it would be helpful. If there's a better clip, I'm all for it, but that would be my suggestion.
Yes, absolutely.
Again, recognizing that it's work.
Absolutely. That's planned. And just connecting to even Dr. Adley's announcements. I don't know if you noticed, but those were typical announcements, and like 3 of them, like, oh, that's a DEI update. That's a DEI update. It's not a DEI update. It's just an update on how school works. It's an update how school has always worked. So it's important for us to keep like refocusing our lens. It's like, yeah, this is the work that we do in schools.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McCammon.
Mr. Cameron, it's there on the updated master agenda. So they're in the master agenda. And I would say some of this is also a wee bit slow and deliberate, because I have to regain and re-engage the staff and the confidence that we can do this, that we're charged to do it, that they're going to get supported to do it, that there's a wee bit of risk involved in it. So I don't want to say we're the starter, because we haven't done it for a very long time. It's a wee bit like SEL. We've been doing the ESL a long time before it was called ESL. It's the fabric of teaching, it's character education, it's all of those things. But certainly there's a hesitancy, right? That can we do this? Are we being supported to do it from everyone? So we also want to do it thoughtfully. So it's a couple of contextual remarks.
Mrs. Parent.
I have a question that's maybe not for tonight, but it falls under the DEI umbrella. I would just, the section 10, 226H has been brought up by a couple board members. I just want to, maybe not for tonight because we have a long agenda ahead of us, but if we could better understand as a board what we are doing to satisfy that and what the regulations are around that. And I would just love to better understand that.
We could do that real quickly now. I mean, it's something that we complete every year for their state report in terms of how we are addressing that. If you want, Chris, you want to just give a couple of updates just real quick?
Sure, I'll do the 30-second version. So every year we do a performance profile report for the state and we have to answer that specific question. So typically we and other districts talk in some general categories. One of them is about outside partnerships. So when you partner with the Anti-Defamation League, when you work with a consultant, when you work with the NCCJ, you talk about some of that work. The other is what are the opportunities you provide in school, not only in your school, but access you provide for students to go out. So what magnet schools can students attend? And then what clubs and activities can students participate in? What sports can they participate in? Music festivals, interscholastic athletics, all of those things qualify under the category. Then there's also targeted groups like the Black Student Union, the GSA. So those are a different category of groups and access that we provide. And then the final part is what are the goals of the district? So for us, since the strategic plan was recently adopted and has diversity, equity, and inclusion as core values and the specific steps, that would be something that would be in the performance profile that year.
Thank you.
Mrs. Parent, I will also add that I spoke to council since this question came up, and I think pretty much what Mr. Tranberg said, that it's an annual report that's filed and that we should be continuously looking at programs that can continue to support that. And I think we do, but there's an annual report that's done. And, he said that's basically the conversation.
And it's 2 years behind always. So if you look up our report, you can always catch what it was 2 years ago.
Yeah. Mrs. Ackman.
So on that point, NEASC asks also, and NEASC gives us our accreditation, right? So NEASC question is often, what are you doing on diversity, equity, inclusion? Given that we have a NEASC review coming up, do you think we'll be able to show significant change over the last report to meet their needs?
So the standards changed for NEASC. So this is the first time that that's a prioritized standard. So in some ways, it's going to be everyone's favorite line in education, a baseline, but they'll provide some evidence of what's happening now. And then there'll be recommendations from that committee as to what might need to be prioritized. But as far as a point of comparison, I can't think, if I compare the new standards to the old, I don't see a through line of how they would try to show what's happened since last time.
Okay, thank you.
I would also say things like word languages and the travel experiences that we're trying to expand, all of those things are like, they're not just, those are all connected and trying to support these things.
Sorry, one last quick. So we still have about a standard 16 to 20 kids who go out of district to other schools, correct?
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. Thank you, Mr. Tranberg. Any other questions? Very good. Thank you. We'll move on to further discussion and approval of the 2022-2023 proposed Board of Education budget. We are currently working with the superintendent's proposed 2022-2023 budget. So bear with us. This is that ad cut night where we go through each line that's been presented in terms of an add or cut. So I will make a motion based on what has been brought up through the last couple of board meetings. It can then be seconded and then discussion and then a vote. So any questions on the process or any more clarity do we think we need around that? Or are we good? Yeah. Mr.
Just to be
Feeney.
clear, you want a second to discuss any of these
Correct.
items, right? You don't want discussion before a second.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct. That's the process. Thank you. Good. All right. We will start with a motion to decrease RC1 Darien High School count 110114.6 FTE physical education teacher, $66,555. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Maroney, discussion. Any discussion on that? May I have a vote on the motion to decrease RC1 Darien High School 110114.6 FTE physical education teacher. A vote to decrease. All those in favor? Mr. Sini, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. McCammon, Mrs. Worm, and Mr. Deneen.
So could I make a request that you do the next two together so that we can,
We're not.
oh, sorry, my bad.
Yes. All those opposed to the decrease, Mrs. Ackman, Mrs. Best, and Mrs. Parent. That motion passes. Thank you. So the next motion is to decrease RC1 Darien High School 21220 for curriculum supervision China exchange stipend.
Nope, nope. We got to do the other two associated with this.
He did
Oh,
a
you did?
66,000 total.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Sini, it's a good point.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Okay,
much.
so-
So in the motion is the full load.
Okay,
of the-
thank you.
Of the salary and the benefits. So it's a good point. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Sure. So we'll move on. Motion to decrease RC1 Darien High School 21220 for curriculum supervision China exchange stipend by $4,701. Do I have a second? Mr. Brown, discussion. Mrs. Ackman.
Sorry, I'd like to understand the cut.
So I believe I put this one up. And I guess while I'm talking, I may as well talk in general as to what I did. So we'll save some time here for everybody this evening. Really, this was an exercise in priorities and looking at priorities in our budget season. We spend an exorbitant amount of time in our budget season not talking about our budgets and what we care about in our budgets. We have an increase request from the Board of Finance and from F&B to try and be around a 2% number. I think if you look at our capital, we're closer to 5. We have had situations where we've had cuts be requested historically, and we've had suggestions that we need to cut 30-odd teachers or cut the music program. I thought this would be a good exercise in going through where our priorities are as a board. As we've heard many times, we're heavy, 70% staff versus 30%. So in order to be able to enact a change, you're going to have to focus on that. I think this board has done very good work lately, looking at the iPad program, looking recently at the school lunch program, taking a look at programs and policies that were put in place long ago by other boards, or even some recently as they're on here. Taking a look and seeing, are they effective? Are we getting what we expect out of them? Are they delivering the education to our students? Are they helping our teachers, providing the technology to be better educators? Do we have systems in place that are really enhancing what our students do and learn? And that really should be our focus as a board. So I really took this as an exercise to put those priorities forward again and be able to focus on that. Apparently that's not the discussion we're interested in having, and that's fine. So I think a number of these I'm not going to proceed on for this evening, but I do think getting our priorities in line around budgets is an important effort we should have been making in budget season, despite the other distractions we've been dealing with. And finally, to China exchange on its own, it's $4,000. We can leave it. I don't know if it's going to happen or not. I think it'd be awesome if it did, but we can just leave it there and hopefully it does. So I will not be voting further on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Any other conversation? Mr. Sini?
Yeah, and just in a broad sense, I just want to make for the record, earlier on in this budget process, when F&B talked about $1 million cut, I requested that, perhaps administration could come back and prioritize some of, what might have to be cut if we had to reach $1 million cut. I was told that that was too much work and I accepted that, but then I shifted it to some of these new initiatives. Again, that wasn't met, and that's administration's, they can do that. But now what the public is watching is the board now make its own priorities in this ad cut list, taking into account some of what we heard. And it goes well beyond what we heard this evening. So I just want to put that in place.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Sini.
Can I just respond to that?
Okay, Mr. Dr. Ellie.
Yeah.
If I may, Mr. Sheeny, with all due respect, you made that request at this table. That was not a request that I thought at that time was made by the full board, nor did I ever say it was too much work to you or at this table.
My
So-
chair did. I'm sorry about that.
I never said it was too much.
Okay.
I can produce the email.
Go ahead, Mrs. Ackman.
So I think it's odd on the night we're cutting the budget that we're talking about our process of prioritization. And I am struggling with that. Mr. Brown, I hear what you're saying, and that is why we have an all-day meeting in January. And we go through a month of kind of saying, what do we want to do? I think what we're missing here, or at least has always been the accepted practice, is when the superintendent presents us with their budget, that is their priorities. And so they have prioritized. Then we do our work. Mr. Sini is correct, creating priorities from that and making decisions about what we accept as a priority. But what we don't do is throw, and I was really asking about China exchange. We can handle the others as they come. What we don't do all of a sudden is say, I decided in the 11th hour to start a conversation with no rationale. And then on the night of, sorry, you're not doing that. Some of you have done it. Old boards have done it, but not well, but maybe new boards have done it. Like, I'm sorry, I am frustrated. I respect the fact that every single board member has the right to cut or add what they see fit. But I am struggling with all of a sudden we are sitting here saying, well, we didn't have priorities. We didn't discuss priorities. Then bring them up. We have met every week in the week of January. Bring them up. Bring them up last week if you want. But I just don't, you don't need me to accept it, but I don't accept it as good work as a board right now. So I'm glad I have a rationale on China. It's 4,000. It doesn't matter. Maybe it matters. I'm very clear on how I can vote on this.
So I will just add, and I think Mr. Sini, you and I have had some very good conversations about this, but I think what we have to think about is how we want to change the process on a go-forward basis. And I think the process has been, and I think the superintendent has put forth a budget that are his priorities. And, in speaking even with board counsel, unless we, through the course at the board table of the last couple of weeks, come back to the superintendent and say, we feel the budget is too high, we would like a % cut or would like a dollar amount cut, then that's something he can work with. I don't think it's good practice to ask for a prioritization, because I do think the budget that the superintendent puts forward is his prioritization, and then we go do the work through a series of meetings. So again, I think we have to do a deep dive after this budget season to see what we can do better, what we can do differently. I think we've heard it from the public, we've heard it from board members, and we'll do that work so we can move forward.
And I do just want to be clear. I was pointing that out. We did not get a priority list. We are doing the good work of the board. We're working off of a lot of these. We discussed that at length. So I'm not speaking for Mr. Brown. So.
No, and I'm not speaking for you. I understand your process and I agree with it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brown.
Yeah, just briefly, I welcome a conversation on process. I think several commentators identified some issues that maybe are best in executive session. I think the process and information that's been provided from the admin speaks to certain line items that really aren't line items that we've always treated. Perhaps we had full line items. So I think identification of the process and revision is necessary. So I welcome that opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mrs. Ackman.
I'm sorry, I'm beating a dead horse. This process has worked for Darien for decades and is outlined, and there's a schedule, and we approve the budget calendar before we even start. I am getting a little frustrated and of that, like, well, we'll do a process review because people just don't like the process, or what feels like to me, maybe didn't do the work to the end of the process. So if you think that the budget needs to be lower, then say it, but just don't say it on the last day. And then when people ask you questions, say, well, I just don't like the process. We need to talk about the process. These are real people's jobs and lives we're talking about.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman.
I'd just like to say I made that request over a month ago. I think you would. So
thank you,
the
Mr.
request
Sini.
was made.
All right, we'll move on.
We have to vote.
China.
That's where I'm trying to move to. So a vote to decrease RC1 Darien High School 21220 for curriculum supervision China exchange stipend by $4,701. All those in favor of the decrease, raise their hands. Okay, so that fails. There's no decrease to the RC1 Darien High School 21220 for curriculum supervision China exchange stipend 4701. I make a motion to decrease RC1 Darien High School 21220 for curriculum supervision SSD coordinator stipend by $4,701. Do I have a second? I do not have a second.
No, you do.
Mrs. Achman.
Love to hear a rationale.
Any conversation? Okay. Go ahead, Mrs. McCammon.
I didn't put this up. I mean, I think we asked a bunch of questions about it. So, I mean, if you're, I don't know if you're looking specifically for Dave, but I think our process is that as a part of the questions, we just have to put these up. So there might be times when there are, these are just up for questions. I recognize there's greater concern, but I don't.
So
I
has
hope
there
we
been
don't
a
have to
question?
Stop at everyone.
So is there an outstanding question?
I don't have one.
Okay.
So we'll move on to a vote to decrease RC1 Darien High School 21220 for curriculum supervision SSD coordinator stipend by $4,701. All those in favor? No one is in favor, so that motion will fail. Next motion to decrease RC1 Darien High School 102003 other student activities China exchange by $7,000. Do I have a second? I do not have a second, so that motion fails. We will move on. Thank you. Next motion to decrease RC1 Darien High School 21102 for assistant principal by $222,235. Do I have a second? Mrs. Achman. Do I have discussion? Mrs.
I
Achman.
do. And this, I can save us time because this goes for all the administrators. This to me is also one of those cuts of not doing your homework. If you read the administrators' contracts, if we cut these positions, we would still have to pay these employees until January of 2023. So we would still need to put money in the budget. They wouldn't be working for us because we would eliminate so we'd be paying people not working for us. I just urge people when they make their cuts, either talk to people, read your contracts, which with the exception of Mrs. Worm and Mrs. Best, we've ratified. I get they may not have a chance to read them all, but like you're wasting taxpayer dollars to pay people not to work for you.
Thank you, Mrs. Achman.
Mr. Denny.
Yes, Mrs. Parent.
I'd just like to echo that. This is a clear example to me that board members are not doing their work. And these are real people's jobs on the line. And we created undue stress for no reason.
Thank you, Mrs. Parent. We'll move to a vote to decrease RC1 Darien High School 21102 for assistant principal by $222,235. All those in favor? There was no one in favor, so that motion fails. Thank you. We move on to motion to decrease RC1 Darien High School 21215 for department chairs by the amount of $704,397. Do I have a second? Mrs. Achman.
Love a rationale.
Any discussion? Okay, we will move, Mrs. Best.
I'll just add, I'd love to understand how this cut was going to help us prioritize. I just don't follow.
Any further discussion? Okay, we'll move on to vote to decrease RC1 Darien High School 21215 for department chairs by $704,397. All those in favor? Nobody in favor. That motion fails. Thank you. Next motion to decrease RC1 Darien High School 21602 for campus monitor by $64,341. Do I have a second? Mr. Sini, discussion.
I just want to, I didn't put this up, but I wanted to see if I remember talking about it. I remember administration saying it was possible and it could work from a budgetary standpoint. But before I vote, I just want to get some clarification that the intent is possible.
No, if we're talking about the same thing, taking
Eliminate one campus monitor and
Yeah.
shift to MMS.
yeah, and we give back the rationale that it's a completely different beast that we're talking about, from outside driving, early dismissals for kids. It's a whole outside campus. It's a whole different rationale. That's not something that I'd be supporting.
Okay, any further discussion?
I have a question.
Yes, Mrs.
So,
Parent.
Dr. Adley, are you saying that if this switch, taking one from the high school to the middle school, would that compromise the safety at the high school?
Well, everything, if you're taking away a level of supervision, so at some level, there's a level of supervision and safety that's reduced. I would not be recommending doing that.
Thank you. Further discussion? We move forward on a vote to decrease RC1 Darien High School 21602 for campus monitor by $64,341. All those in favor? Okay, that motion fails. Thank you. We move on. Motion to increase RC1 Darien High School 102007 for parking fees by $14,740. Do I have a second? Mr. Sini, discussion. Mrs. Ackman.
So I kind of get this one, and it's come up before. I will say years ago, Mr. Herman and I increased parking fees. I would just say our going theory at that time of keeping it in student activities was that we weren't going to use things like that we were directly charging to seniors to offset taxpayer dollars. We were going to put those dollars back to seniors. The board may change and decide that that's not the theory they're going with, but that was the theory at the time. We were charging seniors, but that money we weren't kind of making money off of. We were going to put it right back to the kids. So that's how it became kind of their senior events. And that's just the history. The board can make a decision how they'd like to go on that.
Dr. Adley or Mr. Rudel, what changes in terms of now? Are we going, we'd be looking at fees for students for some of these activities? I think this was a senior lunch or breakfast or.
So if 100% of the parking fees are moved to the board's budget, you would have to collect revenue in another manner to fund those senior events or just not have those senior events. It is a mixed bag within the DERG. There, Wilton, Ridgefield, Weston put 100% of parking fees in the board's budget. Westport puts nothing in the board's budget, uses it for things like senior events. New Canaan is similar to us, where it's a bit of a mixed bag. So there's no right way or wrong way to do it. But if it is moved, it just has to be a way to figure out how to fund senior events if they were to continue.
So you'd be looking for $14,740 from somewhere else to fund these events or collect that from the students.
So some districts charge a fee ranging anywhere from $40 to $80. We do have the district student activity account that you could utilize for a while, but obviously the longer you utilize that, eventually you're going to have to come to some type of solution. But that's basically where you have to go.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. McCown.
What is the typical year-over-year balance or like your end balance for the student activity account? What I'm going for is how long would we go at our current rate before we'd run out of money?
So we have a little over $80,000 in that district student activity account. So if you were to, take $14,000 out of that, every year, plus a little bit of what we take for scholarships, and assuming we sweep in, there would be a good amount of years before you would, run short, at least over 5.
Thank you.
Any other further discussion? May I have a vote to increase RC1 Darien High School 10207 for parking fees by $14,740. All those in favor? That is Mr. Sini, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. McCammon, Mr. Deneen, and Mrs. Worm. All those opposed? Mrs. Best, Mrs. Ackman, and Mrs. Parent. So that motion moves forward. I think we'll need further conversation as to how to work with our seniors and all those activities and events that go forward should, but I think we have to look at the other student activity accounts and funding of those. Next, motion to decrease RC3 Middlesex Middle School 21-21-5 for department chairs by $149,553. Do I have a second? No second, so that motion fails. We'll move forward. Motion to decrease RC3 Middlesex Middle School 24001 for Genius Hour by $16,125. Do I have a second? Mrs. Worm.
So I'm not going to support it, but I am going to make a request.
We need a second.
We need a second.
Need a second. You seconded
I
it.
did second.
Good discussion. Thank you.
I'm going to request that this is optional and not mandatory for students. One of my issues with it was that it's going to increase stress on children. We didn't speak to the children to ask them if they wanted it. I would just ask that it would be optional.
Anything you want to add, Dr. Adley, or?
I appreciate your comments. I see it differently. The school sees it differently, and it's respectfully, Ms. Worm is going to stand as a requirement for all the kids.
So then I would ask, I would like to see an update once the program kicks off, and I think it would be important too to get some student feedback. Great.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Thank you. So that was second. We had discussion. So vote to decrease RC3 Middlesex Middle School 24011 for Genius Hour by $16,125. All those in favor? Thank you. That motion fails. We move on. Motion to decrease RC5 Hinley 510534 for 0.2 FTE physical education teacher by $14,772. Do I have a second? Okay. So that motion fails. All right. Motion to decrease RC11 Athletics 110114 for athletic director by $221,291. Do I have a second? Mrs. Achman. Discussion. Mrs. Achman.
Well, I have some that this isn't the athletic director's position. This is the director of physical education, who is also the athletic director. So this whole line is pulling together all our phys ed teachers, making sure our playgrounds are safe, making sure everything's on track. So one, the cut can't, I mean, we could get rid of it and pay someone to January 2023 again for fun, but it also isn't just an athletic director. There are teachers involved here, there's supervision involved here, there's safety involved here.
Actually, technically can't get rid of it, correct?
Yeah, legally, we have to have an athletic director in that role.
You need someone with the certification.
Yes, correct. Thank you. Any further conversation?
Again,
Good.
I'll just
Sorry,
echo
Mrs.
that
Best.
this is a case of people not doing their work.
Thank you. So now we'll move to a vote to decrease RC11 athletics 110114 for athletic director by $221,291. All those in favor? There was no one. That motion fails. Thank you. Motion to decrease RC12 maintenance 71001 for a groundskeeper by $103,825. Keep in mind that is fully loaded with benefits. May I have a second? Mr. Maroney, discussion.
So for me, I'm
Yeah.
just trying to eliminate as many positions that don't touch students, and I don't feel that the administration, Mr. Lynch, have made a compelling case to add this full-time equivalent.
Thank you, Mr. Maroney. Further discussion. Mrs. McCammon.
I won't be voting for it, and not so much because the administration hasn't made a compelling case, but because I do think the budget's high, and I want to eliminate things that don't directly impact students.
We move forward to a vote to decrease RC12 maintenance 71001 for groundskeeper by $103,825. All those in favor? That is Mr. Sini, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. McCammon, Mr. Deneen, and Mrs. Worm. All those opposed, Mrs. Achman, Mrs. Best, and Mrs. Parent. That motion moves forward. Thank you. Next motion to increase RC13 music 65005 for music uniforms by $8,307. May I have a second? Mrs. Best, discussion.
May I?
Yes, Mrs. Best.
Thanks.
Thank you.
As I've said before, this This attire is required for students who take these courses to complete their coursework for their grades and their credit in these classes. And it has historically been the practice of this board and district to provide students with the materials they need to participate in their coursework.
Thank you, Mrs. Best. Any further discussion? Mrs. Parent?
We pay for uniform or it's for athletics that are extracurricular. These are curricular, and it's my strong opinion that these should be supported.
Again, just remind me, are these specific to band?
This is band, chorus, and orchestra at the
Right.
high school, where they are, in the middle school, there's like a dress code. In the high school, they have specific attire that they're
Okay.
required to wear, and they have to participate in X number of concerts
Right.
per year for their
Okay.
grades.
Thank you. Mr. Sini?
This is another example of policy kind of creeping into our budget session, so I think we should have the conversation, but I won't be supporting it this year.
Thank you, Mr. Sini. Any further discussion? All right, a vote to increase RC 13 music 65005 for music uniforms by $8,307. All those in favor? Mrs. Best, Mrs. Ackman, and Mrs. Parent. All those opposed? Mr. Sini, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. McCammon, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. Worm. All right, that motion fails. Next, motion to increase RC 15 technology 13045 for software maintenance, OpenGov by $109,350. May I have a second? There is no second. That motion fails. Thank you. Motion to decrease RC 15 technology 21201 for Director of Instructional Technology by $221,291. May I have a second? All right, no second. That motion does not move forward. Next, motion to decrease RC 15 technology 11044 for technology support by $102,970. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Barone, discussion.
So again, this to me
Mr. Brown.
is not so student facing, and I feel it's a management issue where it's 1 hour at the high school, 12 hours at Middlesex, and I think along with BYOD that I think we can live without this, but one person's opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Roney. Any further discussion? I guess I would just ask, I don't know, anything to add, Mr. Rudel or Dr. Adley on with the change in the 1-to-1? You know, is there any other insight other than what we've heard around this position?
So the position is based at the middle school.
Right.
So the impact of 1-to-1 doesn't affect the need for the technician.
Okay, clarity.
The size of the middle school at 1,400 students plus over 100 staff, it wouldn't be possible to run that school with just one technician and then moving the other to the middle school.
Okay, thank you. We may have a vote to decrease RC 15 technology 11044 for technology support by $102,970. Keep in mind that's fully loaded with benefits. So all those in favor of a decrease? Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney. All those opposed? Mr. Sini, Mrs. Best, Mrs. Ackman, Mrs. McCammon, Mr. Deneen, and Mrs. Worm. So that motion fails. Thank you. We'll move on. Motion to decrease RC 16 administration 12001 for consulting services demographer by $10,000. Do I have a second? Mr. Brown. Any discussion? Mr. Brown.
So I sent an email to Rich that there was an error in this 16-12001. All of those different line items. My intention was only to cut the $10,000 for the open choice liaison, which I believe, since we're not doing open choice, is no longer in effect. So I would take all of these 16 RC rows off, if possible.
Okay, so we'll let them fail. Okay. So there was a
But
second.
don't we have to vote on this?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, just comment.
Yeah.
But I think we should take that BOE vote 5-4 and place it next to the eliminate open choice.
We have, yeah.
Okay, okay. So just for record keeping, on the description, is it there? I can't, no, it's still Dave Brown up there as well. So just when you guys finalize everything.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we'll vote on a decrease of RC 16 administration 12001 for consulting services demographer by $10,000. All those in favor, that motion fails. Thank you. A motion to decrease RC 16 administration 12001 for consultant services weather service by $2,500. Do I have a second?
You sure you want to keep the same guy?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Or lady.
I thought you had Al Roker's cell phone.
I'm smiling.
That motion, no second, that motion fails. Thank you. Motion to decrease RC 16 administration 12001 for consultant services, superintendent discretionary consultants by $6,000. Do I have a second? No, that motion fails. Thank you. Motion to decrease RC 18 personnel 12001 for budget control by $72,807. Do I have a second? Mr. Sini, discussion?
So that's mine, and Rich did a great job of going back and looking back to fiscal year 18. And, you know, if you take last year out, fiscal year 21, just because we used it for spacing and last year was last year. You know, I know I've been harping on the fact that we have enrollment that's difficult to forecast, but I look back at the history and I think we can move forward with 2 budget control items for the next fiscal year.
Mrs. Aquin.
So my concern with that is we do use this for staff. We use it for special education paras that might come up. We've talked a lot about remediation, which I would urge the board to have more definition around what that means. But if we think we're seeing upticks in SLP, if we think we're seeing upticks in services, that might be another area where we would pull paras from. Also, additionally, it was referenced in Ox Ridge that one year we ended up with large classes. Part of that is due to spacing, but that class actually tipped and we're able to put a para in there to help support that, but not take on a full new FTE at the teaching level. So I think given the number of sections that break, 3 is wise, but I leave it to board discussion.
Further discussion. Mrs. Best.
And I was just going to reiterate that we have 3 classes at 3 elementary schools that are within 1 student of breaking right now as projected. So 3 sounds reasonable to me.
Any other discussion?
I just say
Mrs. Best.
that the fact that there's 3 classes that are already highlighted that are very, very close to tipping 3 makes sense to me.
Well, and
Go ahead, Mrs. Aquin.
I would note that sometimes there were questions about, you know, enrollment programs. Why would you do it? These are all at the upper levels. None of these are at the kindergarten level other than Royal. So I think these are kind of our students we've kind of been known and tracking, and due to class size standard, that's what's causing the breakage in some of these.
Okay, and this decrease brings down the budget control to 2 FTEs, just so everyone understands. Mrs. McCammon.
I'm comfortable using a historical average for this. I think if we really do run into difficulties, we have to have a different conversation. And we can. So anyway, sorry.
Okay, no, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll vote to decrease RC 18 personnel 12001 for budget control by $72,807. All those in favor? Mr. Sini, Mr. Brown, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. McCammon, Mrs. Worm. All those opposed? Mrs. Best, Mrs. Achman, Mr. Deneen, and Mrs. Parent. So that moves forward. Motion to decrease RC 19 curriculum 12001 for consultant services by $20,000. May I have a second? Mr. Sini. Conversation. Any conversation? All right, Mr. Maroney.
So it's my understanding that this is how when we propose cuts, which I will not be supporting, is how we talk to the public and let them know that we're hearing them and that we've heard from both sides. And especially tonight, we heard very pro that this is important. But in previous meetings, we've heard how people don't want to continue with Mr. Shelton and some of these other people that we're working with. So it's just to alert the public to get the feedback that we got. And tonight was very powerful feedback, which has caused me, not caused, but strengthened my resolve that we need to continue to do this. And I will be not supporting the cut.
Thank you, Mr. Maroney. Any further discussion? Mrs. Achman.
I think we're voting on a budget and dollars in it. And that's what we're doing tonight. And that's what these cuts are.
Thank you, Mrs. Achman. Any further discussion? We'll move forward on a vote to decrease RC 19 curriculum 12001 for consultant services by $20,000. All those in favor? Mr. Sini, Mrs. McCammon, and Mrs. Worm. All those opposed? Mrs. Best, Mrs. Ackman, Mr. Maroney, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. Parent. Dave, are you abstaining? Abstaining, so that motion passes. Motion to decrease RC 19 curriculum.
I'm sorry, that motion fails.
That motion fails.
I thought he said no.
I can't count.
I think
So
he
the-
said not pass.
Fails, yeah. All right, thank you. Motion to decrease RC 19 curriculum 12001 for DEI consultant services by $45,000. May I have a second? There's no second, so that motion fails. Thank you. Motion to decrease RC 19 curriculum 25003 for professional development, equitable instruction practices by $24,000. May I have a second? Mrs. Ackman. Discussion. Mrs. Ackman.
So I do think some of the concern that we heard from parents this fall was on DEI. The language can be hard, and then we want to make sure our teachers are using great teaching practices to let both points of view or multiple points of view on any issue be heard. I think just as we've struggled sometimes finding language, that it is really important to train teachers so that they can respect all points of view. And I'm not putting our teachers down. I'm saying this is hard for all of us to do. And so if we really want to empower our teachers to be able to make kids feel comfortable expressing a variety of different points of view, I would think that we would want to support PD that would give them instruction on equitable instruction practices, right? So that nobody feels as if their point of view is less valid. So this seems to me to be maybe an attempt, tell me if I'm wrong, to answer some of those concerns and really train our teachers and coach them how to have really hard conversations, respecting that there are different points of views and different value systems and a whole host of different perspectives that come into your classroom.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. Any further discussion? We'll move to a vote to decrease RC 19 curriculum 25003 for professional development, equitable instructional practices by $24,000. All those in favor? That motion fails. We move forward. Thank you. Last motion to increase RC 26 Darien High School 143003 for ELP tuition by $3,395. Rich must be getting late. Again, we are increasing our percentage to 4%. All right. Second?
I'll second it.
You'll second it. Discussion? Okay, we will move forward with a vote to increase RC 26 Darien High School 143003 for ELP tuition by $3,395. All those in favor? Mr. Sini, Mrs. Best, Mrs. Ackman, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. McCammon, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. Parent, and Mrs. Worm. Any opposed? Any abstaining? Mr. Brown, that motion moves forward. Thank you. So if we have worked through, thank you for the conversation and the questions. So if we've worked through our cut list. Do you have an update, Mr. Rudel?
Yep. So the total reductions were 225,553. So the budget would be $110,607,016, or a 3.74%.
I'm sorry, can you just say that again?
$110,607,016, or 3.74.
Thank you.
Thank you all for the work. Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you.
Actually, I do. I'm sorry. I just want to follow up. I mean,
Sure.
to Dennis's point earlier, and we heard some criticism about people putting items on the ad cut list. If you look back to just last year, one of us was getting criticized for not putting things on the ad cut list till too late. So again, the process, we'll discuss it. But this was a great way, and this is a great way to show interest in discussion. They're not final decisions until we just go through that exercise. So I just want to point that out.
Thank you, Mr. Sini. Mrs. Parent.
I don't know that I would say that it's a great way to fire up some administrators and teachers whose jobs were on the line. I think that was callous. I think there's better ways to have this conversation.
Thank you, Mrs. Parent. Mrs. Ackman.
So Mr. Sini and I agree more tonight than we disagree. And that up until maybe last week and a while ago, maybe pre-COVID, we used to hold a finance committee meeting in between, and we don't have to do it that way. We would really signal, hey, that was a question, I've gotten answers back. I guess what I was objecting to be specific, is Mr. Maroney, respectfully, that when you say, I'm not really serious about it, I think by the time we get tonight, we're supposed to be serious about it because it's on the chopping block. I will couch my comments into say, yes, Mr. Sini, I think there's always room to hear more opinions. I'm glad we do public comment to do that. But I think by the time we get tonight, I will see that we are not final until we vote. But I think we should be at least be serious by the time we get to tonight.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. Mr. Brown.
I would just like to, point out that we do work in public. Transparency is important, and we've seen that. The entire process has been transparent front to back. And, to the point of what's serious, what's not, I think it's all serious. And I think when all this work is done, we've gotten through our entire deliberative process and we go to vote as a board, I think it's important that we all support each other's work and vote affirmatively. So I would hate to have something as reckless as voting against a budget voted on by the entire board after doing its work. So I'm glad we had the chance to do this in a transparent fashion.
Okay, let's be clear.
Mr.
That's an
Brown. Mrs.
objection
Ackman.
to what I did last year. So, I mean, if we want to take shots like that, I get it. You've taken some shots tonight. I was very clear that I was concerned that our budget last year didn't meet state statute. I shared that with the board. I shared that with our superintendent, and I shared that with Mr. Deneen. I said I supported the budget, but I had this concern. I feel like I was open and transparent about it. We can keep bringing it up if we'd like. I don't know that it's productive. That doesn't talk about the work that happened this year. I stand by my vote last year, and I would be happy to talk to anyone who has questions about why and how I did it. It had to do with the reading of statute. I felt differently than other members, and I supported the way they voted. But we can keep reliving last year to justify this year if you'd like. We could do it all night.
Thank you, Mrs. Ackman. Mrs. McCowan.
I'm just going to suggest that we keep moving through the process. There've been a lot of shots taken tonight. I really do think that we benefited last year from some period of self-reflection when we moved on it. We are always growing and learning, and we have to be willing to look at what we did and see if it, how it, and to understand the impact on the people we work with and the people around us. And so I hope we will go through a period of self-reflection after this budget, but I'd like to just finish tonight.
Thank you, Mrs. McCammon. I'll move for a motion to approve the 2022-2023 budget that we just reviewed with the cuts and the additions that we just approved. May I have a motion to approve the Board of Ed budget for the 2022-2023 school year? Mr. Sini, second. Mrs. Best, all those in favor? That is unanimous. So we have a budget. We've moved from the superintendent's proposed budget to the Board of Ed budget. I think the next meeting is our presentation to the Board of Finance on March 1st. I see Mr. Palin in the audience.
We have capital, right?
Excuse me?
We have capital. We have to do the capital.
Yeah, we have to go through capital too. So we'll move on to.
It's there. It's on the bottom.
Yep. Thank you. So we'll move on to any, there were no recommended changes to the capital budget. Any further discussion?
No, there's one. There's one.
Okay. Okay, good, thank you.
Oh, is it not on there? Sorry.
No, it's not on there. That's all right. I will make a motion to eliminate the HVAC replacement under capital for the central office, this office in this particular room for $155,000. May I have a second for that cut?
Second.
Mr. Maroney, discussion? Any further discussion? We'll move to a vote to decrease the capital for central office for the HVAC replacement system by $155,000. All those in favor? Mr. Brown and Mr. Maroney. All those again opposed? Mr. Sini, Mrs. Best, Mrs. Ackman, Mrs. McCammon, Mr. Deneen, and Mrs. Parent. I will make a motion to move forward and approve the capital budget as presented for $2,821,477. Do I have a second? Mrs. McCammon, any discussion? All right, we'll move to a vote to approve the superintendent's recommended capital budget for fiscal year 23, $2,821,477. All those in favor? Mr. Sini, Mrs. Best, Mr. Brown, Mrs. Achman, Mr. Maroney, Mrs. McCammon, Mr. Deneen, Mrs. Parent, and Mrs. Worm. So that moves forward, approval of the capital budget. Thank you. So we have a 2022-2023 operating and capital budget moving from the superintendent's proposed budget to the Board of Ed. So thank you very much. We will move on to further discussion and action on proposed revisions to Board of Education policies. 1025, automatic external defibrillators. 1050, possession of deadly weapons or firearms. 1075, green cleaning programs. 1125, pool safety plan. 1150, sexual offenders. 1175, prohibition against smoking. 1275, freedom of information and freedom of information request log. And 1300, non-discrimination community. Mrs. Achman and Mrs. Sion.
You all saw these during the last cycle. I haven't received any questions on them in between.
Thank you.
If there are tonight, I guess Mrs. Sion and I could approach them, but we haven't received anything today.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Achman. Any further discussion or questions on those policies I just read through? All right, I will move to action to a vote on the proposed revisions to Board of Education policies. 1025, automatic external defibrillators. 1050, possession of deadly weapons or firearms. 1075, green cleaning programs. 1125, pool safety plan. 1150, sexual offenders. 1175, prohibition against smoking. 1275, freedom of information and freedom of information request log. 1300, non-discrimination community. All in favor of the proposed revisions to those policies? Mrs. Best, sorry. Motion to approve second, Mr. Sini, all those in favor? That is unanimous. Those policies move forward. Thank you very much. We'll move on to further discussion and action on board master agenda for February through August 2022. There were some updates, Dr. Adley.
Yeah, these just reflect the diversity, equity, and inclusion regular update to the board, and also which will be part of the curriculum update, the library reimagined, sort of like the curricular instructional function of the libraries.
Good, thank you. Any further questions or discussion on the proposed Board of Education master agenda for February 2022 through August 2022? All right, may I have a motion to approve that? Mrs. McCammon, the second. Mrs. Achman, all those in favor? That is unanimous for the Board of Education master agenda, February 2022 through August 2022. We move on to personal action. We will move on to action items, personal items, appointment, resignations, and retirements. Mrs. Sion.
Just a quick shout out to the high school administration for the ability to replace a biology teacher in January. So thank you to them, and those kids will have real biology.
Thank you, Mrs. Sion. May I have a motion to approve the PAR report as presented? Mr. Maroney, second by Mr. Brown. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. We will move back to public comment. Michelle, we will start with any of our folks in the room. I guess there's nobody in the hallway. So anyone in the room that would like to step up to the podium? All right, thank you. Michelle, anyone on Zoom?
Armel Jacobs, you are unmuted and recognized.
Armel, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Let me just start my video. Hi. I know it's a long night. Just want to say a quick word of thanks for preserving what was in the budget for DEI. And it is not lost on me the way we're moving forward. So thank you to the people who are standing up for taking us into the future, the 21st century. So thank you. Thank you. That's all.
Thanks for speaking, Armel. Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too. Thank you, guys.
Michelle, anyone else?
There are no more raised hands at this time.
All right, thank you. Thank you for those folks joining us in person on Zoom. Again, thank you for all the conversation and the feedback. May I have a motion to adjourn? Mrs. Best, second by Mr. Sini. All those in favor? We will see if we need another meeting before the 20